are upon us. So if you do not know who Ken Pomeroy is, it's time to get familiar. Go to kenpom.com, at Ken Pomeroy on social media. If you need to fill out a bracket, there's not a better guide than Ken Pomeroy. The head coach over at Al Salt Lake is Pablo Mastroeni. He's going to join the show today. And then we'll go maybe even live to the Combine, where Sam Bruckhouse will join us from Sumer Sports. Talk a little Caleb Lomu, talk a little Spencer Fano, and talk some NFL draft on the program with Sam Bruckhouse. It is a Thursday, as we are often wont to do. We will catch up with our friends from Handy and Handy for a little sports court. So busy Thursday show. Thank you for making us a part of your day. Sincerely, really appreciate it. Brian Dunseth, Ken Pomeroy, Pablo Mastroeni, and Sam Bruckhouse. Latest in the landscape of NBA basketball, college hoops as well, as we're kind of getting ready for spring. And that guy, Porter Larson, on a Thursday afternoon. A lot to do, man. Where's your energy being allocated at today?
The lads, of course.
Okay, all right. We're here for the lads. You know that.
I'm a NFL, pre-draft guy. I kind of like that process. I've been involved in it and quite enjoy it. I will say the TV show of the NFL Combine is a little bit much for me, that they go for a week, kind of just trying to create content out of it. But getting the measurements out, some of the guys are starting to get some times down. So I'm paying close attention to the fellas, the local fellas that are trying to make it to the next level.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit. We'll do some draft combine coming up in just a bit. Our first guest today, live in studio, is Brian Dunseth. Before Dunny stops by, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends at Prize Picks. It's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 with Prize Picks.
Shoot your shot on Prize Picks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. That's right, Prize Picks is now giving you $50 in lineups when you sign up and play your first $5. Prize Picks makes every dunk, every diamond, every board that much more exciting, so don't miss your chance to get started on America's #1 app for sports picks. It is available in Utah. No worries there. They got a new feature where it is early payouts. If your player gets off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700, and you're going to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Promo code ESPN700. $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup, because on Prize Picks, it is good to be right. All right, before we catch a break, Dunny's going to join us live in studio coming up after a quick break. The inferiority complex that we have in this state sometimes is, well, it's boring at this point, and it's also maddening at this point. I hate to break it to you because it doesn't go with the narrative that y'all have created. The NBA does not hate you because you play basketball in Utah and because the Jazz play in Salt Lake City. That's not how this works. So we have talked about the Jazz being fined $500,000 for blatantly tanking, which, breaking news, they are. And they deserved to get fined. Yes, my opinion is they deserve to get fined. And also in the scope of this conversation, as I've talked about, there are at least 6, if not more, teams that also deserve hefty fines. The Indiana Pacers got a little bit, $100,000. Rick Carlisle went on a podcast and told a story about the NBA encouraging Indiana to give some medication to Andrew Nembhard so he could actually play. I don't believe Rick Carlisle would be lying. Rick is an excellent coach and a really good guy, and that story in and of itself does not sit well with a lot of people. But it led to an erroneous report that was aggregated and spread to millions of people that the NBA was sending doctors to Utah to follow up on Lauri Markkanen's MRI. Are you kidding me? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. It was easy to poke holes in right away. There's no part of that that's true. If the NBA did that, they would be subject to lawsuits right away. They don't single out one team to follow up MRIs. So Kevin Reynolds, the new NBA beat writer for the Salt Lake Tribune, reports yesterday that Lauri Markkanen has been injured in practice and will undergo MRIs on his hip and his ankle. Now, we don't know officially exactly what's going on. We'll wait to kind of find out the MRI and then report the news at that point. But what I can tell you after talking to people with the Jazz, talking to people with the league, that is as irresponsible of reporting as I've ever seen in my entire life. It's a blatant lie. It's false, okay? So, Jazz back in action tonight. The Pelicans are not trying to tank. They're just bad at basketball. So, of course, the most intriguing thing the rest of the way when it comes to the Jazz is, are they going to be able to lose enough games to hold on to the asset? And tonight is a game that you would very much love to lose. It's weird to talk about NBA basketball like this, but the Pelicans and the Jazz are right next to each other in the standings. That is a 7 o'clock tip here at Delta Center. The Delta Center, excuse me. Bevy of NBA action tonight. A lot of good games. Now, the Big 12 on the men's college basketball side of things taking a break until Saturday. So no Big 12 hoops tonight. You do have a good one in West Lafayette, Indiana at McKay Arena, where Michigan State and Purdue will do battle. But Dunny's live in studio, so let's catch a break. And we're going to do a little World Cup and a little RSL coming up on the other side of a Thursday drive right here on ESPN 700. Want to remind you that we are live on YouTube. So if you want to see a handsome gentleman live in studio right now, RSL original, captain of the Olympic team, 10-year MLS vet, scored the first home goal in the history of Real Salt Lake, and now my TV partner once a week on Talkin' Real on KMYU. Brian Dunseth is live in studio. Dunny, what's going on, man?
Yeah, listen, Spence, it's so much fun to be here. I haven't been in the studio for at least 6 years, so it's nice to be back. Number one, do we know where your Tottenham Hotspur are yet? Have we figured out where on the sliding scale of Premier League promotion?
They're never good.
Oh, okay.
But they're rarely this bad. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, I know. We had a couple challenges that we probably didn't pony up for the bets, but
it's all good.
Just busting your chops. No, listen, 20 years ago, you and I started first working together. We were doing pre- and post-game radio around Real Salt Lake. Mm-hmm. Now we've graduated to some big boy opportunities over at KMYU for talking Real, talking sports, and it's fun, man. It's fun to watch you navigate your early phase of television host.
Yeah.
As we both know, like I have my show on SiriusXM-FC, you have your show here. It's when you're on camera and you're hosting.
Yeah.
The elements are absolutely wild, and it's different. So it's been fun so far.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have you as my teammate because, as you referenced, we kind of started in this business, quite frankly, together 20 years ago. I was very young in it as well, but my career path has mostly just included radio, and my television experience is as an analyst, not a host.
Yeah.
And so this is absolutely brand new, having the IFB in, listening to a producer, and then hearing you and then watching you talk in real time.
Yeah.
I felt a little more comfortable today, but it's going to take a minute for sure.
No, I think it's right brain, left brain too.
Yeah.
I mean, as us hosts in these moments, like you're so comfortable, you kind of know run a show. But then when you're watching elements and you're having to cue things and you know there's going to be sponsored elements and there's going to be drops, there's going to be SOT, there's going to be VO, there's all these different things.
Yeah.
It takes a while.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one, like obviously you've had an incredible handle on sports, both, regionally and nationally here on the channel and the great work that you do. But my world is mainly just soccer.
Mm-hmm.
So from being an analyst as one of the guys describing what's happening after, highlights and goals versus being a play-by-play for Fox Soccer Channel back in the day, where I was responsible for the action itself, to being on the sideline to now being at the desk with TNT and Turner for the coverage of the U.S. men's national team. I've been able to see all of the different roles, which obviously help significantly in moments like this.
Yeah, and look, in this business, any opportunity you get to learn another skill in the ecosystem, you have to attack it. TV stations aren't hiring right now. I don't know if you've read about AI. It's not a great look. So just the chance to do this, and obviously just the chance to be back around the club, because so many fun memories of those early days, and still cheer for them to do great things, especially with Johnny Kimball back, and Jason Christ running the show, and of course our guy Trey. And you and I, in a way, are also in that group of people that were trying to sell soccer to the state 22 years ago.
Yeah, 2005, man. I can remember the first day. It was actually right around the corner. They put me up right next to Pioneer Park. I went to Caputo's, had my very first Caputo sandwich. Ended up doing a television show with Tony Caputo, rest in peace. And then, everything from, we were kissing babies and we were selling soccer. And now I realize how old I am when someone will come up to me at the bar and be like, "Oh my God, you'll never remember this, but like you came when I was in second grade to my school." And I'm like looking at him. Like,
yeah.
Now you're a full grown adult, but realize how old we are. But yeah, man, going back to those my early days here in Salt Lake City, Utah, I knew immediately as long as I could, I was going to settle here. I was going to stay here and do everything I can to try to divest of people's interest of moving here, and at the same time just absolutely loving this.
Well, and you're an advocate for Salt Lake in a way that I think is very important because you're not from here. You weren't born here. You were a California kid, and it's always good to get the perspective of somebody who, and look, it's a weird thing for me because I was born here, but we moved when I was 10. And so my formative years were spent elsewhere, but now this is home. And speaking of how old we are, I've got my 30-year high school reunion next year. And so I'm reconnecting with some high school friends, and they're saying the same thing, like, when are you going to come home? We've always believed you were going to, like, when are you coming home? And I'm like, I am home.
Yeah.
So like Salt Lake and watching this thing grow and watching RSL grow as well, you have a very unique, interesting perspective on this. I mean, one of the memories that will always stick in my craw is in 2005, 2006, Cameron Knowles called me. And he said, is there anything I can do to just make like a couple $100? I didn't know what we were paying those. What was the term?
Great. Yeah.
What was the term for the younger kids, the developmental squad? Yeah. So I had zero clue. And so like I make a call to my kid's principal. I say, hey, can I bring a soccer player to your school this afternoon? Because we had to do something for the paperwork, and I took Cam out, and he spoke to my son's class, and he got paid $250. Like, the way this thing has grown, the team in the league, Dunny, it's pretty stunning based off of where we were, a couple decades ago.
And fascinating you bring up Cam Knowles' name out of all people, because he's now the head coach at Minnesota United.
Exactly,
so you fast forward, 20-some years later. Yeah, listen, when we got here, we were selling soccer to those that already knew soccer. And then for everybody else, it was this fun little thing that maybe you could afford to take your family in. Mm-hmm. No one really knew. But then when you have Clint Mathis, you have Jason Christ, you have Eddie Pope, you have Dante Washington, you had some really established guys. Luke Kremmelmeyer.
My guy, the Laser.
Laser Luke. Mm. But then, we quickly realized that, and this was at a time when Rice Eccles, they hadn't finished the South End Zone yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we were there every single day. And after games, when you'd walk out, like you were amongst the fans, it would take like an hour of signing autographs to actually get out of the stadium and get to your car. And I always felt like that was like our moment to really connect, to really sell what Real Salt Lake could be in Salt Lake City. And all due respect to the Flash and the Freeze and with the Blitz and all the soccer that had already been here, because after I retired, I was able to meet a lot of great people that have done a lot of due diligence, a lot of great work to lay the foundations. And I think you see that with youth soccer if you're involved, whether you're talking about La Roca, or you're talking about Sparta, or you're talking about Utah Avalanche or Utah Red Wolves. There's been a lot of former pros that have played here that have stuck around, and I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing the growth. And even at Real Salt Lake, you referenced John Kimball returning a couple of years ago, but Jason Christ, Tony Beltran, Nick Raimondo now working with the youth and or Real Monarchs. All of these things are important for the growth. So from those moments now, when you look at what's happening down at the Zebra and Harriman, it's one of those where as a father who literally just dropped my son off at the airport to go over to England,
so cool,
to experience his opportunity to play against Burnley and Bolton and Preston North End, and having two more boys that are on their way down to Vegas to play soccer this weekend. I'm so envious and jealous at the same time to think about. I think at my peak, I was making like $125,000. Which was great money back in 2000. It's still great money. It's
sure.
still great.
Yeah.
But like now, if you put it in context, I would say an equivalent would be like a Justin Glad.
Yeah.
He's probably making $1.6 million.
Right.
So you talk about the growth pattern. I think you're seeing it kind of like the Dick Butkus NFL days to like maybe the early basketball days to now what we're seeing right now. Crazy amounts of money. The investment, the infrastructure, top to bottom across the board. I constantly dream at 48, turning 49, that I'm still playing soccer, and just imagining stepping on that field, imagining having all of those assets that these kids now currently have. It's wild to see what we were so fortunate enough to be a part of back in the day.
For sure. And let's stay in the space of kind of growth a little bit, because the Gallup poll taken this year, for the first time, more Americans identify soccer as their favorite sport than baseball or hockey. Yep. So the hierarchy now is football 1, and there's a large gap. Basketball 2, but it's soccer 3. And I bring it up because for a long time we've heard people around MLS or around the game here domestically like, okay, it's just going to take a generation, right? We just have to keep going. We have to keep building. And I approached it kind of in a skeptical way because I was not a soccer guy at all. I mean, as the story goes, when my father took me to lunch to say, here's my idea, I'm going to bring a soccer club here, I said, what are you doing? Like, why would you do that? It didn't make sense
just
to me.
Give me the money.
And now he absolutely was correct. And I'm a proud son. I want to make sure his legacy is always taken care of as the guy who did create this idea. Now, of course, it was then moved to the hands of some different owners, and I do want to get to that in a moment. But as far as the way this game has grown, Dunny, and the sport has grown, as we approach the World Cup in our region, the last time the World Cup was here, it literally led to the implementation and creation of MLS. So what's kind of the hope of what the World Cup in our region could mean for the next step of growth?
I would equate it to the idea of what happened with the 2002 Winter Olympics here. But like, imagine that multiplied by gajillions. I think anytime we're talking about a World Cup year, everybody knows that the world's eyeballs are going to be on this tournament. I mean, for me, I watched the semifinals and the finals of the World Cup, Argentina, France. I was in Barcelona. I was on La Rambla.
Nice.
I got to experience this weird kind of Spanish support for Lionel Messi because of his ties to Barcelona, which was this incredible experience. So going back 1994, I was a sophomore, junior, 16, 17 years old. And I couldn't afford tickets to the World Cup. I was at the Rose Bowl. I now have a show with Tony Miola Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Sirius XM that we're just talking about soccer. But like Alexi Lawless was my first roommate with Mike Burns for the New England Revolution, John Harkes, Eric Winalda, Tab Ramos, all these guys, like they were my like iconic soccer players because one day I thought that maybe I could find a similar pathway. Mm-hmm. Fast forward, I'm still like their baby brother. I'm still kind of like their little knucklehead. Mm-hmm. But I get the opportunity to have these relationships. And never once did I think, going back to 1994, it's kind of all these pinch me moments where we couldn't afford tickets. I was donating my time. I was at the LA Convention Center, and they were doing these World Cup kind of convention center incredible experiences. But then during the World Cup games themselves, I would go park in Pasadena. I would hike down into the gully, and I would go be around the Rose Bowl just so I could feel the atmosphere and be around the World Cup and just see the cultures and the songs and the fan base and all of those things. So it was incredible. I got to experience that in real time. So now fast forward, whether we're talking about, NBC Sports doing an amazing job with Premier League coverage, whether we're talking about CBS Sports doing an amazing job with Serie A coverage, whether we talk about MLS and Apple TV's coverage of Major League Soccer, whether we talk about the Champions League coverage, Europa League coverage, all of this. Even last year, summer being the lead analyst for TNT and Turner, shout out to Shaq and Chuck, to be their lead analyst and do FIFA Club World Cup in conjunction with DAZN. The DAZN app was worldwide live, and I could tell you, coming off some of these games, whether it was PSG against Chelsea in the final, or it was say Bayern Munich against and I don't know, insert name here, Atletico Madrid. The DAZN, like the DAZN executives would walk in after we'd get done with calling the game, and they'd be like, "This is blowing our minds. We never thought we could have these type of eyeballs on this product that's happening right now." So I think we're in the fast forward mode. Last year in 2025, I believe spending for incoming players for Major League Soccer was up 80%. Obviously, the focus right now is Lionel Messi, is Sung Hyung-min from Tottenham going to LAFC, is Thomas Muller going to Vancouver, Rodrigo De Paul going to Inter Miami. But as I say that, the average age of incoming players were just 24 years of age. Oh. And now the decision made by hierarchy at Major League Soccer to drop the double paywall. So effectively, as long as you have an Apple TV subscription, now you get access to Major League Soccer, to MLS games. Already, I think it was up 59%. Just the eyeballs on Apple TV from 2025 to 2026. So it gives you at least some lower data points of kind of the direction. But I also think, similar to your conversation when you started the show about kind of the insecurity of fan bases, I think that's been a problem for soccer for a long time because it's been this constant sell of, hey, at some point they're going to be up in this whatever theoretical big 2, big 3, big 4, big 5, which I always kind of equated soccer as like punk rock music, or for like kids that skated with me growing up in Southern California. Like, we got our lane. Everybody knows who we are. As long as we're comfortable and we're authentic, then I think a lot of people are going to start to buy in. But this summer, it's going to be huge and really, really important for Mauricio Pochettino, anywhere from Christian Pulisic to Weston McKennie to Tyler Adams to insert name here. It's a great opportunity for these guys to feel the strength and the true power of what the World Cup is, because we saw that with Tony Miola, Tab Ramos, Alexi Lawless, Marcelo Balboa, all of the greats from that 94 group.
So let's get into how I'll phrase it. Excuse me. How I'll phrase it is a realistic expectation for the U.S. men's national team. Now, I'll just kind of cede to you. The group draw seems to be pretty favorable. The talent pool seems to be a little bit both wider and also better top-end talent than we've ever had. I know a lot of the former World Cup men's national team players have been critical, which is sometimes the job when you're in media. So let's not get our feelings hurt, young
critical
men.
Or realistic. There's two variables.
Yeah, and it's been a little bit disappointing watching the current group just not be able to take criticism from players whose job it is to speak into a microphone.
Yeah.
So your thoughts on I want to know your thought on that dynamic, and then as a soccer country, what are realistic expectations for the national team this World Cup cycle?
Yeah, I think first off, the Tim Howard, Landon Donovan, kind of DeMarcus Beasley generation, Clint Dempsey generation that just retired, they have every right to be critical and put their opinion based on performance. And I've always been very clear, for me, as long as you don't make it personal, if it's just about performance driven, well, then these type of personalities have every right to offer up an opinion and or pontificate their view based on their experiences. I mean, I'm at the desk for Turner, and we've got the lead up for U.S. men's national team against Belgium, against let's see, who is it? Portugal, Belgium and Portugal in Atlanta, Senegal and Charlotte, and then Chicago. They're going to play Germany, and that is going to literally walk you in to the first game of the World Cup. And it's funny the amount of heat that we get at times on social, because you're putting an informed perspective out there publicly, and there's fan bases that are so tribalistic for certain players and or certain teams that they have a really tough time digesting any type. Then it becomes like, who are you, bro? And where did you play? And all that inevitable comparison. What happened with Landon or Tim or Clint is nothing different than what happened with Tony Meola, Alexi Lawless, John Harkes, Eric Winalda. It's just times changed. The immediacy of the access.
Yeah.
So where are they at? I would say the best thing that has happened in the last 8 years for U.S. soccer is Mauricio Pochettino coming in, your former Tottenham Hotspur head coach, and the fact that he's brought his staff, whether you talk about Jesus, you talk about Mickey, you talk about Tony Jimenez, you talk about anyone involved. They have a very unique way of creating a culture, and we do this thing where we've kind of like weaponized vibes, right? Oh, the vibes are great. We like weaponize it.
Yeah.
He's created a culture of accountability. He's created a culture and I think self-policing amongst the group itself, with also a presence that demands respect the moment that he walks through the door. Because how do you puff up your chest towards someone who's been to Champions League finals? How do you puff out your chest and have an ego for someone who's coached Lionel Messi, who's coached Neymar, who's coached Mbappe, who's coached, Sergio Ramos, Gianluca Donnarumma, like all these massive world-class elite players. So I think what he's done is, by subtraction at times, not allowing Christian Pulisic to show up, or maybe pushing Yunus Musa to the outside, or maybe holding Weston McKennie's feet to the fire in certain situations. What they've done is they've created kind of a secondary subculture where guys like Diego Luna, Malik Tillman, those type of guys can all of a sudden come in, Chris Richards at Crystal Palace, and say, all right, this is who we are. This is who we want to be. And because we've been together, because we've had these 6-week runs during summer tournament competitions, now you have to reintegrate yourself into this new idea of who that is. And again, that could be Tim Weah, that could be Weston McKennie, that could be Christian Pulisic, that could be Flo Balogun, that could be all of the guys that were in Europe that for one reason or another needed a mental break, a physical break. Because Mauricio Pochettino is Argentine. He played in the World Cup. He's played for some incredible managers. So when you have that experience and you have that kind of mentality, and there's a machismo that comes along with it, all of a sudden there's got to be this, wait a second, why aren't you making yourself available for your national team?
For sure, yeah.
National team should be way more important than your domestic. Like, I understand you need rest. You're still going to get your rest, but you have a responsibility to wear the crest. And I think because of the subtraction, he was able to create multiplication of a base where he could look in different directions. And for example, even when Christian Pulisic returns in the fall window, Diego Luna's playing so well. Malik Tillman's playing so well. Alex Sendejas is a great outlier in this conversation. Gio Reyna comes back in. All of a sudden, you feel in worst case scenario, if Christian Pulisic isn't available, all of a sudden you got some guys that can fulfill that type of role, because now it's about the collective with the individual still shining as opposed to the individual shining. And this isn't a conversation for Christian alone. This is more of like it doesn't matter if you're lowest on the totem pole or you are the best player on the team, quote unquote, or you play at the biggest club. So for me, the great news is that the draw are all teams that are familiar. In the last calendar year, we expect even in the playoff game where it would most likely it's Turkey, Romania, Slovakia, Kosovo is going to be the winner of those 4 teams, will be the last and final team. I believe it'll be Turkey. Arda Güler, who plays for Real Madrid, is going to headline that team. They've beat Paraguay. They've beat Australia. And basically the last 6 match days, notwithstanding the first 45 minutes in New Jersey against South Korea and Sung Hyun-min, where they gave up 2 goals, they went to a formation change, went to 3 in the back, and I feel like that's really benefited them. So all of a sudden, you're looking at the 3 defenders, the goalkeeper, and the 2 wide outside attacking players, roughly 6'3" to 6'4". So you got big, you got strong, you got athletic, very, very strong mentality, very intelligent, temperamental at times, has a little bit of dark arts in them, and all of a sudden, I think they've got kind of that gray area of how do you survive in moments where it is about manipulation, but at the same time, it's about scoring goals and winning the game outright.
So, I mean, oftentimes we say, well, just get out of the group. And based off of your breakdown, feels like there's a good chance not to just get out of the group, but maybe win the group. No, let's just operate off the premise that they do that, either win the group or get out of the group. And then it's hard, right? Because it's the knockout stage and you don't know what the draw is going to be. But beyond getting out of the group, what's a reasonable thing to expect?
2002, they got to the quarterfinals. And had it not been for, if VAR was around in 2002, the United States would have gone on and they would have beat Germany. Torsten Frings had a handball on the line, which negated Greg Berhalter at the time, his goal, and that would have put them into the Final Four. I mean, so you're right. From the moment that you've calculated your path to qualify for the World Cup, there's so many things that can happen. And I even go back to 2010 World Cup when Charlie Davies, less than 24 hours after qualifying for the World Cup in Honduras, gets into a car accident that takes the life of the passenger and forever alters the course of not only his professional life, but his life himself. And then in that game that happened that next day, Aguchi Onyewu tears his knee. So those 2 guys, those 2 starters are immediately out of the World Cup and out of contention. So anything can go sideways. But the games, it's a very favorable draw in terms of location. LA, Seattle, back to LA, Paraguay, Australia, and most likely Turkey. And if you get through that group, which I think psychologically, because they've beaten these teams, with the exception of Turkey, again, if VAR was in effect, they would have beat them. They are going to feel incredibly comfortable with this draw because, thankfully, the scheduling gods were beneficial, that they already have that respect of having the understanding of played against them earlier. Yeah.
One more question about the national team, then we'll do some RSL before I know you got to get out of here. Striker, who first choice 9? I mean, what are the names and who do you think Pochettino lands on?
Yeah, it'd be Flo Balogun, formerly of Arsenal Football Club. He's over at Monaco right now. He actually just scored 2 goals against PSG 2 weeks ago in the Champions League. Flo decided to make the one-time switch from England over to the United States. He, for me, is easily the number 9. Now, it becomes interesting because Ricardo Pepi right now is at PSV Eindhoven. He missed out on the World Cup. Greg Berhalter did not take him to the World Cup in 2022. I would say he's either a starter or an impact sub off the bench. And then there's 2 players that I think because of their physical profile. Haji Wright, who plays at Coventry City, he's one. And then Patrick Agyemang, who was at Charlotte. He's a very late bloomer, very late developer. He's absolutely flying right now for Derby County. I believe he's got 13 or 14 goals after joining last year. So I think that's kind of the 4-prong attack that Mauricio Pochettino is going to choose from. It's probably too little too late for Josh Sargent, who just got that big $22 to $27 million move to Toronto FC, similar to the days of Josie Altidore and Michael Bradley up in Toronto. Now that Bill Manning is gone, they've gone into a different direction, younger, more dynamic. But yeah, Josh Sargent's probably out, but I would say Flo Balogun, Ricardo Pepi, Haji Wright, Patrick Agyemang, those are going to be the 4 strikers.
And Diego's a lock, right? Like he's making the team. He's probably going to see some minutes. Is that fair to say?
As long as Diego Luna stays healthy, I can't see a world in which Mauricio Pochettino does not take him. Okay. But as I say that, in this position, So there's going to be two players or two positions in that role for Diego Luna that he can take up. He's coming up against Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Gio Reyna, Malik Tillman, Alex Zendejas, and that would be and Jack McGlynn down in Houston. So he's effectively got 6 guys he's competing with. But the good news for Diego Luna and for Real Salt Lake fans is that I believe from January of 2025 to now, Diego Luna has appeared in either a starting role or a substitution role in every game that Mauricio Pochettino has been manager.
Okay.
So he said after he broke his nose and ended up staying on the field and got the assist, he said he's got big balls. And that was wild to hear in real time.
Yeah.
And he said, but listen, there's a certain amount of determination that I'm looking for. Obviously, I'm looking for the technical ability. I'm looking for, the consistency of performance. I'm looking for the buy-in. But the thing that Diego Luna has is that he's bet on himself. In all of these moments where San Jose didn't want him or the Olympic team didn't want him, Diego has proven to be MLS Newcomer of the Year, MLS All-Star, a full national team player. And so for all of those, I think he feeds into all of those people that don't believe in him, and he's going to bet on himself. And I think that's what separates him from a mental standpoint, that dog mentality. I think that's what really helps him.
It's funny. I had never watched a World Cup before we brought RSL here. And then it's like, I got to get to know this sport. I got to get to know this game. And I was so captivated in 2006. It was the first World Cup that I had ever watched. Yeah. And that was when, Brazil was like the big, you remember they had the Nike ad with, with Ronaldinho and old school Ronaldo and Roberto Carlos. And it was like the coolest experience to actually dig into it and understand what it's about, because I don't think any of us here domestically, and I'll just speak for myself, really have any idea how big this tournament is worldwide. You know what I mean?
No, you will feel the power.
Yeah.
Yeah, I promise.
Yeah.
And listen, man, you got the Olympics coming, you got Winter Olympics coming back here to Salt Lake. Like these, and you'll probably have the Women's World Cup in the United States not too far off as well. I think in terms of and I think the FIFA Club World Cup this past summer with all of these domestic clubs around the world, from Argentina and Brazil to Japan and South Korea to South Korea and Morocco to obviously with Bayern Munich and Chelsea and PSG, what it showed is there's a huge appetite. And I'm not here to sell people on soccer. I couldn't give a flying squirrel.
Right.
Like you're into it or you're not into it.
Yeah.
But I can promise you that it's not a subculture anymore, right? I think that we're seeing the numbers that are confirming that there's a significant amount of eyeballs and an appetite for people to put their credit card down and spend significant sums to kind of take in what the game's bringing them.
Yeah, and to your point, I think soccer has carved out its place in our country, regardless of what happens moving forward. I'm just proof that if you give it a chance, you could actually learn to appreciate it and enjoy it. You know what I mean? Just
I also wonder how much FIFA, playing FIFA.
The video game?
Allowed people to kind of start to learn their teams. And now, my boys are in a world in which they follow players, not teams.
Right.
Like I'm a Manchester United homer. Out of all the sporting teams in the world, that's the only team that invokes emotion out of me. Everything else I'm indifferent to.
Right.
But now, the kids, they're watching TikTok, they're watching Instagram, they're doing all these things, and now they're consuming personalities or certain ways of playing, as opposed to us being being beholden to the history of a team that once served us well and now just disappoints us.
Yeah, it's really interesting. All right, about 5 minutes left here, 4 minutes left here, Donnie. Let's just get a thought on RSL. So and by the way, I'll take a chance to tease 10:35 KMYU tonight, episode 2 of Talking Real with myself and Donnie, who's live in studio. Just give us a quick rundown of the spend, because that's what people want to know. Who are these new players? How much did we spend on them, and how good are they?
There was a report that came out 2 days ago that Real Salt Lake was the 10th highest off-season spend coming through the end of 25 to the start of 26. So roughly $14 million, and at the same time earning anywhere from $3.5 to $4.5 million based on departures of either talented players or players that just never clicked. And Diogo Gonçalves is probably the headline of that. But moving Ojeda down to Orlando, moving Vera to CF Montreal, amongst a couple other moves. Listen, I've been around this team for a long time, from 2005, and I rode the wave along with you and your father, Dave, following, Garth Lagerwey and Jason Kreis in the 2009 MLS Cup, and the CONCACAF Champions Cup finals and the U.S. Open Cup finals and the return to MLS Cups. With all due respect to those players that were household soccer names for Salt, like the pillars, the building blocks of this club, in the attacking phase of play, and I say this with context of Chicho Arango and Anderson Julio, 12 months and 18 months respectively being a part of this group, I am more excited than I have been in a long, long time, if not ever, about this attacking phase of play and this switch of a formation. I'm intrigued to see. I think Lucas Engel coming over from FC Cincinnati as the left side center back in a back three is a huge addition. Very quietly, maybe the most important. We'll see with Spearings coming in, the Dutchman sitting in that protective six, and how he plays the game differently than Brian Ojeda. Sanabria, Uruguayan international coming from San Luis, who is the captain in Liga MX. He's going to be just a warrior of a battler, but also his sprint to recovery ratio is elite, similar to Gozo, opposite side of him. I think Guilavogui, who comes in, is going to play a little bit deeper, maybe a little bit closer to Diego Luna, who is given complete control of this team. Like, he's got the Ferrari, he's got the keys. So he will be the number 10, and he's got the number 10 on his back. And then Olatunji, the Nigerian up top. I mean, he's got such a great presence, really, really intelligent with his runs. And all I know, Spence, is that I went to training 3 times in this preseason when they were in between going to Portugal and going to Southern California and getting ready for Vancouver. When you put that starting 11 on the field in the attacking phase of play, that front 6 group, I haven't seen a more athletic, outstanding group of players in terms of their speed and their variation of creating goal score opportunities. This is day and night compared to what we saw last year, where this team was really whittled down offensively. So it's a big season. And then even guys like Ezekani and Luka Moisa, kind of that next year underneath Xavier Goso, these 2 young players coming through academy and getting their shine up in Vancouver. There's a lot of small little glimpses that lead me to believe that Real Salt Lake is very capable of being a top 4 team in the Western Conference.
That was going to be my final thing. Where you think they kind of exist, and the young kids showed themselves well against a really good Vancouver side last week, but couldn't come up with a result. 38 goals scored last year, was 3rd worst in MLS. But since you referenced top 4, final thing I'll ask you, give us a quick preview for Saturday, home opener.
Yeah.
Seattle in town, 5:30 Mountain Time on Apple TV. Your thoughts on who is available and what that might look like?
I might be wrong, but I believe since Freddie Juarez divested of his head coaching spot and Pablo Mastroeni took over, that Freddie and Seattle have not won in Salt Lake.
I think that's right, yeah.
You hate to see it.
They really do.
I never understood why, if you're the head coach, you'd want to be an assistant coach, even though you're already the head coach. But my structure, I guess, of thinking is different. But I also went to Cal State Fullerton,
Indeed,
so that doesn't matter. 3 semesters. Yeah, Jordan Morris picked up a quad issue, I think like 3 or 4 minutes in the game, so he'll be unavailable. He's out for 3 weeks. Jesus Ferreiro, who came up from FC Dallas last year, he had 2 assists. Paul Rothrock coming off the bench. Albert Rusnak, former midfielder from Real Salt Lake, has been excellent for Seattle. They're going to be great on set pieces, whether you talk about Jackson Reagan or you talk about Yamar, 2 center backs. They've changed goalkeeper, so they've gone with Andrew Thomas, who's been very quietly trying to earn his spot as the undisputed number 1 in Seattle. And Brian Smetzer and former Real Salt Lake general manager, now current Seattle Sounders manager, Craig Weibel, have done an amazing job building a really competitive roster. So it'll be a battle, but these are the games that I think you start to separate yourself with regards to perception in the Western Conference, but still with the understanding that, guys, it's going to take about 5 games for everybody to be fully acclimated because of the paperwork issues that used to take 7 to 10 days and now taking anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 weeks based on the political climate around the world.
Well said, buddy. Hey, great to see you. Great job
fun,
as always.
man.
Yeah, look, radio's just more relaxing. TV's just more like uptight. So kind of in my element. But thanks for the time. Be good, okay?
Appreciate you.
Brian Dunseth, we'll catch a break. Switching gears, Ken Pomeroy will join us coming up next. Talk a little college basketball. Keep it here on ESPN 700. All right, we got Pablo Mastroetti stopping by today, the head coach of RSL. It's the home opener for Real Salt Lake. They're taking on Seattle. Sam Bruckhaus will join us maybe live at the NFL Combine, as the Combine is going on right now. NFL Draft April the 23rd through the 25th, so it's right around the corner. College basketball time, though. March is right around the corner, so it's that time of year where you're going to get the email from your work or from a friend that you have to fill out a bracket. Well, if you haven't done your prep work, it's time to dig in with the professor. I just made that up. Ken Pomeroy, how are you, sir?
I am doing great. Not an actual professor, just for the record.
Well, I mean, look, we live in a day and age where I feel like you can just say that you're a thing and you're not really a thing. Like TikTok is full of psychiatrists and therapists and doctors that aren't really doctors and therapists. So let's just call you Professor Ken. Is that good? Is that good?
All right. I'm down with that. If you got my back on any sort of lawsuit that may come forward regarding fraud and whatnot, then I'm all for it.
I've got your back, Ken. So let's start with what has just been simply a very frustrating long year for the Utah men's basketball team, as we thought it was going to be. And we'll see if, final few games somewhat winnable. So my question is, are you seeing growth? Are you seeing improvement? And what have you made so far of year one of Utah basketball under Alex Jensen?
Yeah, I don't think it's particularly surprising that they've struggled in, one of the best leagues in America, given, a new coach, a late start on building a roster. You can't start building a roster in March or April these days. It's a year-round process. So given all those factors, yeah, not surprising. I would say growth-wise, I would say they have grown more than the average Big 12 team. They've improved more than the average Big 12 team. We haven't necessarily seen that in results, although the one at West Virginia actually sneakily impressive. Pushing Cincinnati to the wire on the road, sneakily impressive. They don't get run off the court in the first 10 minutes of the game. There are positives to look at, but obviously just a year where Alex Jensen gets his feet wet, and next year will be more of a tell on what the future looks like under this coaching staff, because they'll have a full recruiting cycle to work with and kind of build a team in the image that they want.
I don't know how else to ask this than just to ask it. Do they do anything well? I mean, when it comes to the metrics, are they what? If there's something to latch on to that's positive about how they play, what does that sound like, Ken?
It's difficult, Spence.
I know. I was just trying to be positive here during a really, really hard year.
Yeah. I would like to be positive as well. They are competent at shooting the 3-pointer. That's what we'll go with. But
Okay.
they don't take a lot of threes, and it's kind of it's a brutal profile in Big 12 play. It's just here's something. They are good at preventing opponent 3-pointers, which is something, especially if you have really good rim protection or interior defense. That's a great style to play. They don't have that yet, but if they can pair the aggressive perimeter defense with a rim protector inside, then we're talking about the makings of a defense that can put some fear into Big 12 opponents.
Good God. That is dire. But, I mean, look, it is what it is, okay? I just really want this to work for Al. One more thing, because, we all know the deal. We know what time it is. When it comes to the talent on paper, or certainly lack thereof, are there pieces that you could see that Alex would want back to build upon, or does it just feel like the talent across the board has to be upgraded?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some interesting decisions in that regard. Terrence Brown among them. Terrence Brown is obviously a gifted scorer, but that's what he's going to be. If you keep him around, he's going to be your number one option. The offense will revolve around him. And do you foresee a future exceptional offense with that situation? So that's kind of one of the questions that Alex Jensen's going to have to ask. I think guys further down the roster, overhauling the entire roster, isn't unprecedented. But it's really not a great look. And there's like role players, I think, down the line that, Seydou Traore could, he could play a role. I mean, ideally that role would be probably off the bench and not as a starter. Kendall Sanders, who was, their most highly touted freshman coming in, has struggled a little bit with Big 12 competition. So I don't know if he's a guy that would be back, but again, if you can keep him and play him in a reserve role, that's fine. But by and large, like the starting lineup, I don't think it has to be completely overhauled, but if you have like 3 starters back from this year into next year and they're still starting, it's probably not a great sign for a team that has the 14th ranked offense in the Big 12.
Yeah, for sure. All right, before we get over to some other local stuff, when it comes to your data, your metrics, is the Big 12 the best conference in college basketball this year? And if not, who would you go with and why?
Yeah, I think it's the best conference at the top. So this gets into a somewhat, I don't know, uninteresting argument, I think, about how to rank conferences. Like, we don't need to get too much into the weeds on that. But, for the way I rank conferences is by the average team. So, like, how hard is it to go 500 in a particular league? And the SEC ends up rating out as the best league in those terms because the bottom of their league and the middle of their league is stronger than any other league by, a decent margin. Like, the top of the league, they don't have the national title contenders they had last year. I mean, it's basically Florida, and that's probably it. And so the Big 12 and the Big 10 both have advantages in that area. So it just depends on, how you want to rate teams. If you're the commissioner of the Big 12, you're going to want to rate a conference by the top of the league. And if you're the commissioner of the SEC, you're going to want to rate conferences by the average team in your league.
Before we move off Utah, I actually had one more because the final 3 games of the regular season prior to the Big 12 tournament, I guess I'll phrase them as winnable based off the fact that it isn't any of the behemoths. It's at Arizona State, it's home against Colorado, and it's at Baylor. So I know you don't love to do like the prediction stuff, and with the current landscape of people being able to bet on these things, I don't blame you, and I'm not asking that. I'm just generally speaking, like, if you're a Ute fan, final 3 games, what does success look like, Ken?
What does success look like? I mean, I think you'd like to see them win one of those games. Certainly 2 is possible. I mean, the home game against Colorado, there's a chance the Utes will be favored in that game. So, that tells you something. And then obviously at Arizona State, you got a dead coach walking in terms of Bobby Hurley. So opportunity there. And at Baylor, Baylor's had a pretty disappointing year. So that's, as you say, those games are winnable. They will be, fairly significant underdogs in those 2 road games, but the Utes have been competitive. Like I said, I mean, I think it's the one thing you can be happy about. I know Alex Jensen, rightfully so, has said in, recent press conferences that the time is over for moral victories, and he's absolutely right. But, if they're competitive in both those games, there's a chance that things break their way at the end and they can win one. So I think winning 1 is the bare minimum expectation here, and winning 2 is conceivable, but I wouldn't get my hopes up.
Oh, Ken. Okay, let's move on before we start getting emails because we're the home of the Utes. So when it comes to the BYU stuff, I will admit that I may have been wrong. I thought they were going to be much better than this. I thought they'd be maybe a top 3 team in the league. So the question I have is how much of what I perceive to be a disappointing season is injury related, and how much of it is just maybe we miscalculated on how good they could be?
Yeah, I think it's a little more of the latter. Not that anyone was that far off with them. Like, they've been, when they were fully healthy, they were, say, mildly disappointing relative to expectations, although those expectations were a little loftier relative to some of the preseason computer ratings, including my own. But nonetheless, there's a world where if Richie Saunders doesn't get hurt, they end up as a 4 or 5 seed, and I think again that's not far off from where many people thought they would be. So yeah, I mean, the injuries now I think provide a nice excuse down the stretch, and certainly the results of the UCF game were shocking. But I got news for you. Like, Richie Saunders, isn't worth 20 points. They're probably losing that UCF game regardless. If, UCF's going to shoot threes the way they did. So the injuries have been a factor, but yeah, I mean, overall, like, I would say a mildly disappointing season, especially given the investment in the players.
So what exactly do they lose with Richie, and has it changed your calculation about who they are in this conference and what they can do come NCAA tournament time?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, his contributions offensively are just impossible to compensate for. The quick release on the three-point shot, the ability to attack closeouts, the ability to just have gravity out there and attract defensive attention in a way that allows Rob Wright and AJ DeMonsa a little more freedom to do their thing. And you just can't. They don't have anybody on the roster to make that up. I mean, they have a bunch of role players, and so you kind of got what you got now. The offense is going to struggle a little bit more, although I will say AJ DeMonsa is still pretty impressive considering everything I just talked about. But yeah, so that's really the issue. Like, defensively, I don't think Richie was necessarily a plus defender. I don't think he was a minus defender, but it's, defense is more team oriented and a little bit easier to compensate for the loss of somebody, especially, a wing like Saunders. Like, it's fairly easy to make that up. And I know people will say, well, the UCF game, so that was pretty brutal. And, the 4 games they played without Saunders, that was clearly their worst defensive effort. But also UCF just shot lights out. And I know after the game, Kevin Young's like, hey, we didn't guard the three-point line very well, but I guarantee you there were nights this season where they didn't guard the three-point line very well, and teams didn't make them pay for it. So they were kind of on the wrong end of some bad three-point luck, and obviously more to it than that when you get beat by as much as they do, but that was certainly a factor.
Yeah, and look, that's why trying to predict this stuff is impossible come NCAA tournament time. I mean, a team is just going to get hot, and UCF's not a bad team, but I've watched them, 4 or 5 times. They didn't look anything like they did against Brigham Young. That I will say, though, they did struggle defensively. The broadcast pointed out that BYU did look confused. But that's just elite epic shot making too, right? And that's just not necessarily something that you expect to run into every night. But the fact that those things happen underscores how hard it is to predict this stuff, because you just never know.
Right. I mean, that's what makes the sport great, I think, especially in its modern form, is that the three-point shot is highly variable from game to game, and sometimes people get, I don't know, they don't necessarily respect variance, Spence. They make sweeping judgments after games based, and you look at the three-point section of the box score, like it can explain a lot of these lopsided games, which, by the way, this season, seeing more lopsided games among games between top 50 opponents than we have ever seen in my record in my database. So, that's partly due to like teams taking more threes and shooting them better and a faster pace. It's the higher scoring game right now. But, I mean, you see it all the time. Like UConn St. John's last night, UConn wins by almost 40 after they lost to St. John's earlier in the season. 2 weeks ago, UConn loses to Creighton at home after beating them by 27 on the road 2 weeks earlier. So even, if BYU faced UCF again in the Marriott Center, despite the fact they just got their doors blown off, they would be a significant favorite. Like, that's just the reality.
Yeah, no, for sure. So let's move over here. I've changed who I believe the best team in the Big 12 is, maybe 7 times. I picked Houston to win the league to start the thing. Arizona looked really unbeatable early on. Completely underestimated Iowa State. As you referenced, the top end talent of this league is really good. There's Kansas, there's Texas Tech. So 2-part question, who do you think is the best team in this league right now? And give me the amount of teams you're willing to say can win the league, either regular season or the tournament.
Yeah, so Arizona is the best team in the league. I mean, that win at Houston was incredibly impressive. And then, going to Baylor, following that up with the win at Baylor, just kind of maybe a letdown spot. Was also impressive. Baylor really pushing to the limit, but Arizona able to make some plays down the stretch. And mind you, doing this all without, one of the best freshmen in the country in Koa Pete, who presumably is coming back soon. So I'd go Arizona still as the best team. Houston, I've kind of followed that same path you have, where beginning of the season, they were my number one, and they did not look great, I thought, the first month of the year. The offense in particular really struggled, but as Kingston Flemings has emerged and Chris Sinak has kind of found his role as a freshman, the offense looked better. No better than it looked, in their win at BYU. And so I think Houston's the second best team. There's still some concerns there. The defense isn't quite as good as it has been in the past, and the offense relies too much on mid-range shots, but it did that last year, and they obviously went pretty far. So those would be the top two. And I mean, Arizona's in the front runner for the league title regular season. Obviously, they'd be the front runner for the conference tournament as well. Although anything can happen there, and it's where Iowa State kind of comes into play because they typically have the best fan support, along with Kansas, at the Big 12 tournament. So that will essentially play a role there. Iowa State has a very good track record in the Big 12 tournament.
Let's give a little love to our friends up north. Utah State got smoked by San Diego State, but if I'm reading your rankings correctly, you have Utah State as the highest-ranked Mountain West Conference team, and kind of by a long shot, I believe, Ken. The next team is San Diego State at 42. You've got Utah State at 25. What stands out about the Aggies this year?
Yeah, and a little bit of a rough patch here. Got, beat up on the road a bit. Certainly losing to Nevada wasn't ideal, and then not really being competitive against San Diego State. Maybe raises some red flags. I mean, I still think this is like the best Utah State team we've seen in the past, 10, 15 years. So I still think there should be some optimism. Their profile is really nice, especially on the offensive end. I have them as the 19th best offense in the country, 9th best in two-point offense. So those are really good signs, and I think they'll get the ship right. And I do think they're the best team in the Mountain West, and should be able to guide this thing into another tournament bid, and hopefully a first-round win, maybe a second-round win. But it's a really nice roster that Jared Calhoun's put together. It's a mix of guys coming back like Drake Allen and Mason Fallslev and Carson Templin, and then adding, MJ Collins is a really high-level transfer from Vanderbilt. The offense has been really fun to watch, especially when it's cooking at its finest.
So, as far as the best team in the country, that Michigan-Duke game was awesome, and they're both really good. We already talked about Arizona. I see that you have Illinois up there, Florida, defending national champs. So I'll ask you a macro question, kind of like I did about the Big 12. Who right now, Ken, would you say is the best team in America? And throw a few others in there as far as a team that you think could be cutting down the nets when March Madness is over.
Well, you just gave a great summary. In my ratings right now, it's kind of interesting. Duke is number one over Michigan, but the difference is as small as it can possibly get. So it's possible. I don't believe either team plays tonight. So it's possible that, after a few finals tonight, like 1 and 2 could actually switch, even though neither of those teams is involved. That's how close they are. But those are the two best teams in the country. I mean, it's tempting to say Duke's the best because they just beat Michigan, but I think the longer track record would suggest Michigan is maybe a hair better. But it's obviously very close and within the margin of error. And I think those are two legitimate co-favorites. With Arizona, you could throw them into that mix as a third. I would probably just put them a half step behind those top two, but very close and clearly a national title contender. And then it gets maybe a little murky after that. I mean, I think people have a lot of confidence in both Florida and Houston just based on the fact that they both made the national title game last year. And obviously the longer track record for Houston is pretty great. And Florida's, emerged with Todd Golden as head coach as being pretty reliable. And they've been playing especially well of late. So throw those two in the mix. Illinois may be more of a question mark. Very good offensively, best offense in the country, but a little weak on the defensive side. You got teams like Purdue that fit that same profile. Iowa State, kind of the opposite, really good defensively, but maybe weaker offensively. So some weaknesses for those teams. And then there's kind of the mystery team in UConn who, looks like they're going to be on track for a number one seed. Have generally struggled, I would say, to put weaker teams away. And typically that's not a great sign for tournament success. Obviously, did not have that problem against St. John's last night in a big way. St. John's shooting 17% on 2-point shots last night, which was a low in the last 30 years for the St. John's program. So UConn's an interesting team, a team to watch. I would sell on them relative to national perception, but you can't rule out a team with the track record that Danny Hurley has had in the NCAA tournament.
Ken, before I set you loose, of interest around here certainly will be draft lottery night when we find out where the Utah Jazz will be drafting. I do believe they will lose their way into holding on the asset. I think they've made that clear. So much so they're willing to write $500,000 checks to the league. This is a hell of a freshman class. I mean, unbelievably deep. All of the attention up top is DeBonsa and Peterson and Boozer. Those are kind of the three names. But you referenced Kingston Flemings. I've seen that kid play up close a couple of times. He's really impressive. And we could keep going, but I'll just kind of leave the space here. If the Utah Jazz finally luck in to the number one pick in the NBA draft, who is the best prospect for them on the board?
I think it's Darren Peterson, if you are convinced he's going to have normal health. Like, that's the real question. This year's been somewhat rough for him, obviously staying on the floor with various ailments, which some have presumed are maybe not that serious, and he's just trying to, rest and avoid, putting too many miles on tires, to kind of preserve his status as the consensus top pick or nearly consensus top pick. But if you're convinced of that, once he goes through draft workouts and interviews, like, teams will get a good feel for that. I think he ends up being number one. When he has played, he has been awesome. Now, A.J. DeBonsa does not have that problem. He has played every minute he possibly can, it seems like, and he too has been awesome. And if there's any question about Darren Peterson's will to perform, if he's, people think he's got, Ben Simmons disease or whatever, then obviously DeBonsa will rocket to number one. Whoever, it's almost a year where maybe you'd rather pick two, right? Because you kind of want somebody else making that decision, and then you don't have to get criticized for it, because I think the second pick should be pretty obvious. Although you throw Cam Boozer in there as well. Like, he's a guy who also deserves scrutiny, even though people sort of, question his lack of athleticism. Although I feel like that's a more minor quibble in the modern NBA game than it would have been, say, 20, 30 years ago.
All right, Ken, we turn our calendars to March on Sunday, so it's your time of year. For our listeners out there that will be asked, encouraged, or forced to fill out an NCAA tournament bracket, how can they get a hold of your work and make sure that they're informed?
Yeah, it's just you go to kenpom.com. It couldn't be any easier. Ratings are right there on the front page, and then if you want some more interesting and detailed information, including team and player stats and various significant categories, you just have to pay $24.95 for a 12-month subscription. It'll be good for the tournament, and it'll be good for most of next season. So that's how it works.
Ken, you're the man. Thank you, my friend. Be well. We'll chat soon, okay?
All right. Sounds great, Spence.
Ken Pomeroy, kenpom.com. I'm telling you, pros, college teams, they all use his stuff. If you've listened to radio shows or watched TV shows before and you've heard them reference a Ken Pom rating, that is the guy, Ken Pomeroy. KenPom.com is where you go. I use it for prep for the show, and then when I fill out my bracket, I use it as a guide. You should too. All right, before we catch a break, I want to let you know you can swing into Golf by Worldwide Golf to get custom fit for the new Ping G4 4K driver. It's the new standard and straight with dual carbon fly wrap and a faster face. It's Ping's highest MOI, most forgiving driver ever. Our good friends at Golf. The PGA Tour is, kind of at the Cognizant Classic in the Palm Beaches because the field is not awesome. Austin Smotherman is leading the way at 9 under par. Nick Echevarria, I believe. I don't know any of these players at 8 under par. Then it's Taylor Moore, Jackson Suber, Ken Roy, Daniel Berger. I know Daniel. And then Christopher Reeton. I don't know any of these players at 4 under par. Then the following golf, no, there's too many to read. There's like 17 at 3 under. Tony Finau is not playing in this tournament. Oh, there's a Shane Lowry sighting. Maybe a lot of the good players aren't playing well. I don't think you guys are interested in me essentially giving you my inner monologue as I'm looking at a golf leaderboard, so we'll break. And we'll bring in Pablo Mastroeni coming up after a quick break right here on ESPN 700. You know, it feels like spring outside today, about 62 degrees and sunny, so that must mean soccer season is here, and it is. RSL with their home opener coming up on Saturday at 5:30 against the Seattle Sounders. RSL 10-2-9 all-time in home openers. Seattle has not won in Salt Lake since 2012, and RSL has kind of owned this matchup in the regular season, 13-1-4 all-time against Seattle. Our next guest is in charge of running the club. He is the head coach. He is Pablo Mastroeni on a Thursday afternoon. Hello, Pablo. How are you, sir?
Happy Thursday, Spence.
I got to start here. How are you feeling? Are you doing okay? Are you on the up and up?
Yeah, just dealing with a little bit of a flu bug, but feel great today. I was out in the field, so feeling better.
All right, that a guy. So it was I really enjoyed turning on the television to see Vancouver take on the Monarchs. Just kidding. I was stunned when I saw the lineup slide. Now, you joined us last week, and you teased that we would see the Luka Moise kid. And look, I really just want to give you space because I want to hear from you. Without knowing much about these players and knowing just what a quality side Vancouver was, I was a little bit nervous about how that thing was going to go. And I know you're not about moral victories, neither am I, but I'm not even the coach, and I was proud of them. You must have been pretty proud of that group, yeah?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then throw on top of that, Spence, that those front four guys didn't even know they were starting until the day before the game.
Wow.
Right. So, like, we had, I think, 4 guys knocked out on Thursday, and so those 4 guys stepped in. And so given the again, I think the context of the situation, right, these guys not really planning to play this weekend or that weekend, and the performance they put forth and really the understanding of what we wanted to do. Obviously, some of the execution wasn't on, but that was to be expected. And I just thought the guys competed the right way. And again, those young guys were up against, one of the most experienced teams in the league. They got national team players up and down their spine, a World Cup champion and Mueller, and so, for our guys to be able to conduct themselves the way they did. And to be fair, I think we fell short a little bit and we had 2 really good opportunities. One called back from an offside that was questionable. And then obviously Ari had a ball that he could have played back and we could have been up 1-0. And then there's a red card situation. So all things being equal, the guys really put themselves in position to win that game. And so, like you said, not so much for moral victories, but in context, I thought it was a really good performance from the group and one that we can definitely build upon.
Let me hone in so we can get to know some of these young men a little bit more. And let's start with Luka Moise, who you told us was going to start last week. And we'll get to Saturday in a moment, whether or not Stein's going to be available, update on Emeka and such. But in a vacuum, first of all, you told me that he was young, and then they showed him on television. I'm like, he didn't say he was 10. Like, what? This kid looks like a very, very young person, but he played like a very mature professional. Give me your thoughts on his performance.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't look like he's 17. He looks a lot younger. But I'll tell you, he's got the soccer brain of an experienced player, and by that I mean his spatial awareness in possession, his spatial awareness defensively, and interpreting plays before they happen. It's one of the things that I think takes the longest time for players to get up to speed with, and that's where your ability to play one touch means you understand where you're receiving the ball in relationship to everyone else and having the foresight to be able to know where my player is going to be and play one touch. And so he's got a really good knack of understanding the game. He's got an engine that allows him to get across the field, and and he can make plays. The ball he played out to Alex for the goal that was called back was a really top play. And the other thing too is he's as brave as they come. He's a bit diminutive yet, hasn't grown into his body, but he's not scared to throw his body around. And so, what I see is a future top player in this league and beyond. I think he's got all the skill sets, and you see at a real young age of what they're capable of. And because he's got such a fantastic soccer brain, there's no doubt in my mind that Luke is going to be a great player.
Let's move over to Aiden Hezarkani, another name who I had just heard, but unfamiliar with the young man. And there were some really, really quality, bright moments from him. So let's just get to know him. What should we know? Yeah,
so Aiden's been in and around the group the last couple of years. He got his, he debuted last year and played, I think, 45 minutes or maybe the year before. But he's been right on the fringe of, the 20-man roster the last couple of years and had a really breakout preseason. And one of the things about Aiden, he's left-footed, plays on the right side, and he's what I describe him as he's a very good 1v1 player, very technical, but he's also what his strength is being really well balanced. He rides tackles. He's in control of his body. He's got a great eye for goal and can make a final pass. And so another great young prospect who's now cutting his teeth with the group and feeling more comfortable, and a guy that, delivers great set pieces as well. So, I think Aiden's going to be another one of these great academy players that come through the system and finds himself in first-team football.
Finally, Zach Booth, the Apple Television broadcast, he was kind of the young player that they were giving maybe the most attention to and the most love. So another youngster that we need to get to know. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, so again, another player that started in the academy, went to Europe and try to, continue to hone his craft there. Didn't get what he wanted out of that experience, and we brought him back here. And again, I think Zach's strengths are, one, his physical capacity is elite. He's his change of pace is top, and he's got really great top end speed. So he's more of a stretch player that can get in behind defenses. And technically he's continuing to improve, and he needs to continue to improve his ability in front of goal. But again, another young player that has a ton of promise, that adds a little bit of dynamic stretch to our attack versus Aiden, which is more of a dribbler 1v1 player.
So let's talk about, I don't want to rub salt in the wound, but upon further review, I wonder what you've learned about the goal, because, I don't know my elbow from my rear end about this game, but I've been watching it long enough that if there's a long ball switch fields, like it you can kind of tell right away that it might be offsides. And so when I think it was Moisa played the ball to Katranis, my instant reaction was, oh, that's close. But then he crosses into, and there's no way Pio was off. That no way. So the replay, Pablo, was very inconclusive. So I still am sitting here unclear about whether or not that was offsides.
Yeah, and that's the same thing that that all of us were thinking as well, because it looked, again, if you look at the screen, you can't see it because of the way the camera's set up. And one of the technologies that we don't have is the VAR offside line. And they have that all over Europe. We just don't have that. And so then it becomes the eye of the official on the sideline, and you just got to go with it. I've seen them, sometimes when the grass is cut a certain way across the field, even though the lines of the guy cutting the grass might not be perfect, they use those lines to kind of depict whether or not, their foot is in the same shade as the ball, as the last defender. So in this particular play, it was inconclusive, but they went and reviewed it. Obviously, there was some doubt that it was the right call, but because there's no way to confirm yes or no, they have to go with the linesman's call.
I have to ask you the question, because when I was watching the broadcast, when you're heated in a moment, the last thing you want is for somebody to tell you to calm down. Did you want to choke that official? That must have been so annoying to have him just tell you to calm down. I was annoyed for you.
Yeah, I to be fair, I think that was after Luka went down with a stud early in the second half.
Okay.
And we're all seeing it as a red card, and he's telling me to calm down because he's telling me that they're reviewing it in his ear, and then they review it and they said it's just a yellow card, and then of course after the game the competition committee reviews it and say, no, it was a clear red card offense. And again, all these moments just affect the game. And that's why it's so difficult. When we have, there's 4 officials on the field, there's 3 or 4 in the VAR facility, wherever that is, and they're all looking at the same thing. And then you have a committee, on Monday go, yeah, that was a clear red. And so obviously them receiving a red card with 40 minutes left to play would have completely transformed the way that game went, and probably the result as well.
One more question about last week before we move into looking ahead, because there was another player who made his debut, Sergi Solans, who was drafted a couple years ago, came on in the second half. So again, in the spirit of trying to get to know the new players on the club, what should we know about this young man?
Yeah, Sergi Solans is a very good attacking player. We played him in the 10 role, just our numbers were down, and we needed players to come in and spell, Aiden and Zach Booth. And so he played in the 10 role. He did a really good job of holding the ball up. His primary role is a 9. And he comes with a history of scoring a lot of goals in college, right? So last year, I think he had 16 goals for UCLA. So he's got a knack of making really good runs on the front line, good box movement, and a very good finisher. And so, I see him moving forward as more of a 9 than a 10, but he's capable of playing both positions. But again, his hold-up play is very good to bring his teammates into the attack. His movement off the ball is very good. And like I said, he scored 16 goals last year in college, and the expectation is that he'll put himself in positions to score a lot of goals for us this year.
All right, moving over to Seattle, and if I'm leaving somebody out, feel free to let me know. But Gilavogi, the designated player, striker, Stein, Spearings, the midfielder, Sanabria, in addition to Lucas Engel, and I know I'm forgetting, Arias, I believe. So I'll just say, of the 6 new pieces, well, I guess it's 5 because we just talked about Sergio. Of the 5 new pieces, who are we likely to see, whether starting or being available, coming up on Saturday?
Yeah, Lucas Engel has trained the last couple of days, and he's been really bright. He's a left side center back who's got a ton of experience. Played in the championship in England last year. Played with Cincinnati, but a fantastic gentleman who has a high soccer acumen. Who's tough in the tackle, but also very, very good in the attack. So he's back in the group. We'll probably at some point see him in the game. And then the other one is Morgan Gilavogi. But he just got in on Wednesday and trained with us today. We'll train tomorrow and might see some limited minutes on Saturday. But again, it's this risk reward with the travel and the change of time zones. And given that he's been away for a little bit of time, he'll more than likely he will see the field. As to how much, we're still kind of going through that with our performance staff. And then Stein has had a very start-stop last 2 months. And, I think he still needs some time to get his feet under him. So more than likely won't be available for this game. And then Arias as well is a player who's still coming into full form, fitness, and, recovering from an injury and won't be available for this game. So, Engel will be available. Gilavogi will be available. And then the other one is, I just got news today that Sanabria's P1 was finally passed through, so he'll be available for selection at the game on Saturday as well. And still deciding as to how we're going to go with that. But again, a very dynamic left wing back who's fantastic in the attack, great in the defense, and just brings a level of soccer acumen that our team definitely needs.
Do we need to give a public kudos to Chase? Is he the one that's dealing with all of this paperwork? Who's the one behind the scenes that we need to acknowledge with how difficult these processes have become?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Chase Rusden needs a big kudos to Chase. He's working extremely hard to get all these things bounced. I couldn't imagine having to deal with. And then every country needs a certain different type of piece of paperwork that and it's it is juggling plates. So. He's done a really good job of getting these things across the line, expediting these meetings or these visa appointments. Not a position I'd want to be in, but Chase is doing a great job and shows up with a smile on his face every day.
All right, so Seattle, as I referenced earlier, it's this interesting thing where RSL, historically speaking, has really done well against Seattle, certainly at home, and they're a quality side. They're a quality side again this year. So it is the home opener. You don't have to give me your 11, but what I'll ask you is, as far as the 11 that you went with last week, how similar or / different do you think it's going to look?
Just given the arrival of all these different scenarios and the players just coming in, I think it'll be relatively similar to last week. And there might be one, maybe 2 changes to that group from last week, but relatively similar. And, I think as the weeks go on, hopefully by week 5, we should have, access to all the players in some sort of physical shape to be able to contribute meaningful minutes. But the expectation is the group that we had last week will continue to, make gains and continue to grow together so that when the other guys are ready, we've set a great foundation for those guys coming on board.
How about Diego and Olatunji? I mean, of course, two key pieces in the attack. Can we get an update on them?
Yeah, we're still I think a week or two away with both those guys.
Okay.
Yeah, it's. I mean, when it rains, it pours. If it wasn't Visa, it was injuries. So again, we have some real firepower. They're just not available at the moment with all those guys, and then obviously with Victor and Diego. But I think they're making progress, and so that's why I think by Game 4, Game 5, we should have the complete group. But again, I think that's why the focus is really on these guys to lay a great foundation and do some great work and have an opportunity to express themselves the right way and earn a spot and make a stake for themselves in this group. So that's our challenge for the group this weekend against Seattle.
So before we get to Seattle specifically, of course, as you and I have discussed, the motivation for both some of the talent acquisition and the schematic adjustments with the 3-5-2 was to be more dangerous in the attack because you got to score goals. We didn't see one put up on the board, at least officially last week. How do you change that? How are you more dangerous in attack while you're waiting for your most dangerous attacking pieces to play?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think too the other variable to throw into that is also playing on the road for the first game. I think that obviously, home teams, home openers, you got the fans behind them. Obviously, they had a big year last year, and so we wanted to be on the front foot. Where we fell short, I felt like, is we defended well as a group, but in transition, Spence, I thought we gave the ball away cheap, and so that was an area of work this week. In other words, when we win the ball, if we can connect 3 or 4 passes, we can now control the game with the ball. That will now allow us to get in our attacking shape a little bit more to create more dangerous chances. The other part is actually when we do break in transition is finishing plays and making better decisions. There was a play in the second half of that game where we had a 2v1 close to their goal and nothing. We didn't even get a shot off, right? So I think it's early days. We've got to refine, our decision making and obviously create better chances in front of goal for sure. And hopefully at home with a group that's pretty similar to last week, playing together, understanding the areas that we wanted to improve upon from last week. Hopefully the guys go out with a bit of confidence and can get the job done.
Who's wearing the armband? Is it Cabral?
Yeah, Cabral's wearing the armband.
Okay, very cool. Well earned there. All right, before I say Lou, Seattle got a result against Colorado week 1 up at Lumen in their place. Former RSL midfielder Albert Rusnak with a goal. Some additions in the offseason. I think Jordan Morris is injured, so you may not have to deal with him. But a good team. What are you up against as Seattle rolls into town, Pablo?
Yeah, they're a really dynamic team, and I think one of the strengths of the Seattle team is they bring back pretty much the same group every year, minus 1 or 2 players that they sprinkle in, and so the consistency that they have in their group allows them to really be dynamic in the way they present their tactics, right? So they attack in a similar setup that we do, but with guys like Jesus Ferreira in 110 and Albert Rusnak in the other 10, they have these free roles to really peel off and find different gaps. So it's really more, just going over the videotape the last couple of days is, it's a tough scheme to kind of nail down as to how do we make it black and white for our group, because their experience and their ability to find and interpret space is really, really good. And so I think it's a group that we have to be really on the front foot defensively. And I feel like if we can kind of, break up a couple plays, be aggressive in the tackle early days in the game, I feel like we will now be able to impose ourselves with the ball against, again, a Seattle team that defends really, really well. So the reason why they've been a good team is because they do everything well. Transition moments, attack, defense. They're an experienced group. And so I think they'll ask some real questions of our group. But I believe that at home with our fans, the mindset the group has and their willingness to get a result at home, I feel like it's going to be a really competitive game and one that hopefully we come away with 3 points with.
All right, man. Well, good stuff. Glad you're feeling better. I will withhold judgment until you actually have your players at your disposal, but I will wish you the best of luck on Saturday. Be well, okay?
Thanks, Spence. Appreciate you, bud.
All right, Pablo Mastroeni, RSL head coach. Some unfortunate news there and concerned about Diego. I didn't realize that there was anything going on with him that was more than just a short-term thing. So Diego Luna, Victor Olatunji, not available. Lucas Engel looks like he will be. Morgan Giolavogi, who's the designated player, potentially available. No Arias, no Stein, and questionable about Sanabria. So of the, 6 new pieces, it looks like 3 are available for sure, maybe 4. But with no Olatunji and no Diego Luna, I mean, that's tough in attack. So RSL's home opener coming up on Saturday against Seattle. It is a 5:30 kick time, which is a little earlier than usual, and the weather is supposed to be phenomenal, so it should be a nice night out there at America First Field. You can go to rsl.com for single game and season ticket options. Don't forget Lionel Messi is making his way to Utah coming up in April, so appreciate our friends at RSL. Appreciate my friends at Burger Fusion. Have you been to Burger Fusion? I've been telling you that you need to go to Burger Fusion. It's a brand new burger place in Trolley Square. It's right around the corner from Whole Foods. Remember where the Trolley Wing Company was? That kind of train type setup situation? The cart, whatever they called that. It's right there, okay? So it's brand new, and I'm telling you, it's as good as any burger place that I've tried anywhere, not just in Utah. So you can order it and pick it up. You can DoorDash it. I don't recommend that because oftentimes it doesn't show up warm. I would go in and eat there or pick it up with our good friends at Burger Fusion. So you can check out Burger Fusion. Again, Trolley Square. Let me give you the exact coordinates here. 490 South, 700 East. Okay, so like right around the corner from Whole Foods. And check out a couple of the things that they have on their menu. Okay, they've got great appetizers and sides. They've got mozzarella squares. They've got great fried Havarti pickle spears. We actually had some in studio not too long ago. Their fries are awesome. Onion rings, too. They've got house-made chips, one of my favorite things. You can do the half fry and half onion ring. And then all of their burgers have, like, unique concepts, okay? Great dipping sauces, usual ketchup, ranch, barbecue sauce, honey barbecue, mango habanero, sweet chili, aioli, garlic parmesan, which is my favorite. They got fry sauce, of course, anything you need. They got great desserts if you're looking for that. But when it comes to their burgers, all of the burgers are courtesy of Snake River Farms. So it's Chuck and American Wagyu straight from Straight River Farms. The Velvet Smoke Show, creamy peanut butter, berry jam, bacon, caramelized onions, hot honey pickles, and coleslaw. My favorite so far is the Cheese Royale. It's a very simple one. It's cheddar cheese, it's caramelized onions, tomato, and coleslaw as well. But they've got a bunch. You can go check out burgerfusion.com. And I'd go in there tonight, man. I'd go check it out. If you want something for dinner, head on in, order, pick it up, and you can take the risk of door dashing, but oftentimes it doesn't show up warm. Not Burger Fusion's fault. It's just tough to get a burger delivered. So our good friends at Burger Fusion. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Switch gears, talk some NFL football coming up, NFL Combine football coming up, and NFL Draft with Sam Bruckhouse. We'll do a little sports court later on. Then we'll get to the 5 o'clock hour of the show. Busy Thursday show. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Dave Fox is sending me selfies. He's about to call a basketball game. He's 8 years old.
My favorite thing is when I get texts from him, not regarding the show, because that usually means he's forgot or is complaining about timing or whatnot. But otherwise, it's always like a selfie or, as I got last week, a video of him screaming on a roller coaster, shirtless somewhere on a beach.
He sends you shirtless pics? Oh, dear. Oh, dear. All right. I miss our next guest because it's not NFL season right now, but NFL football always topical. So let's bring on our guy, Sam Bruckhouse from Sumer Sports. Hello, Sam. How are you, buddy?
Man, I'm out here in Indianapolis. And to be honest, the Combine, I think, might be my favorite event, including even the games. Now, I love football more than the rest of us, but I come out here every year. And I come out here with a goal. The goal is to learn more about what the consensus is about the NFL draft. Every year I learn some stuff. I come up with new hypotheses about what to believe about each of these prospects, and it's my job to go check the data, whether to prove or disprove some of that stuff. So we got a bunch of cool insights for y'all. Excited to talk about them.
Love to hear that. Okay, so you need to educate us a little bit. On-field drills began today. And, we'll go throughout the course of the next few days. What's the best measure, in your opinion, Sam, of what will make a good pro? Like, what does that sound like? Because there's so many measurements, there's so many drills. What are the actual things that are important?
Yeah, if I were to break it down out of 10 across positions, the Combine and their athletic test would matter only about a 3 out of 10. So what does that mean? It's certainly not a 0. We're able to get some element of productivity, particularly from stuff like, the 40 for inside backers and tight ends. Some of the other athletic tests, the short shuttle 3-cone for interior offensive linemen and tackles. But it's really at its maximum only about a 3 out of 10. The other 7 spots out of 10 are dealt with stuff like the medicals and their on-field play, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like you're going to learn who these guys are, and it's not like if you have a guy like Grayson Holden who is a defensive tackle and weighs around 300 pounds and jumps 36.5 inches up in the air on his vertical jump, that all of a sudden he's just a great prospect. That's not necessarily the case, but it does give us a sense of maybe if guys are really at the level or expected to go in a similar range, which guy should maybe be a pick ahead of the other one. That's really all it can really tell us at the Combine. That being said, there's a lot of other stuff going on here. There's medicals going on. There's interviews. You have agents and teams talking. You have free agency stuff being ironed out at the Steak and Shake down here late night. And so there is other elements of the Combine that are really important. The athletic test only about a 3 out of 10, though.
All right, let's get into some local stuff. Then we'll kind of expand the conversation. And it's been known for quite some time that Spencer Fano is kind of good at playing football and a pretty decent offensive lineman. And his stock over the past year and a half has shot up to the point where most people believe he's probably a top, 5 or 6 pick. What insight, Sam, can you share with us about Spencer Fano and just generally speaking where we might hear his name called?
So as I've been talking to all the analysts, and my job as a data scientist is try to build consensus, right? I'm trying to take a ton of data points, put them into one, and then check that and see if the data agrees. What I've kind of learned is that people truly believe in his ability to run block, and I think the data bears that out a little bit. We have him as a guy who, when he succeeds on a play, when he scores out well, it means good stuff for the offense on run plays. So we certifiably think that he's a quality run blocker. We also think he's pretty good at pulling. Exotic run looks were used in that Utah run-heavy offense. And as a result, I think we are pretty confident that he's going to be able to do that at the next level. Some people are a little hesitant or they just haven't seen it yet in the pass game. But there's an interesting element here in the data where the quarterback position is liable for a lot of sacks. Sack avoidance is a quarterback stat, in my opinion. And so as a result, you have guys like Garrett Bowles and Quinn Miners and Mike McGlinchey who are certainly good pass blockers, but Bo Nix just doesn't get sacked, so they look all the much more better. I think if Spencer Fano is to go to a team in which there is a quarterback that does not get sacked and effectively avoids sacks, let's just say that, he will look substantially better because his run blocking will be able to shine, and the pass blocking, whatever that distribution may be covered up a little bit. And as a result, I think he's probably certifiably, if not the top offensive tackle in this draft, the second best offensive tackle of this draft. I think it's between him and Francis Maui-Noa out of Miami. I think he's certifiably a top tackle as a result. He has the run blocking. The pass blocking can be papered over by a quarterback in some situations. And so I think he projects well to the next level.
Of course, the other tackle this year for Utah football was Caleb Lomu, and a lot of people hopeful that he would stick around, but completely understanding why he did not, because a lot of people believe Caleb is also a first-round pick. Sam, what can you share?
Yeah, I think it's a similar story as long as it pertains to like the Utah offense being so run-heavy. So we don't necessarily have an excellent idea of what type of drop back, old school one-on-one style pass blocker Lomu is. But what we do know is that he can control the line of scrimmage. We've seen them do that time and time again over the years at Utah. Here's another criticism that shows up with Lomu, though, is his weight. A lot of people have said that these guys can move really well, but they can't necessarily push stuff around the way some of these bigger tackles can. And I think that's a fair criticism. I just struggle to really find great correlations between the combine weight and production as set up by like the number of snaps the tackle is allowed to play in their top 3 years. So there is a question mark there. There's not an excellent correlation. It's certainly something to continue watching, continue monitoring, but that's kind of the trend on Lomu there.
So you were able to get to know Lander Barton a little bit, with some conversations you had with him during one of the bowl games you guys attended. I can remember interviewing you during that week. And Lander, of course, is a good friend of the program, good friend of the station, comes from great stock, and had a very solid college career. Do you have any insight on how Lander has performed so far this week and what sort of, buzz or maybe lack thereof around him? Like, do you think there's a chance Lander Barton gets drafted?
Yeah, we discussed back then how he did have some excellent traits and that it was just going to be about it all coming together at the right time during draft season. A lot of times people like to say there's risers and fallers, and I don't necessarily like to believe anyone is rising. I think that it's just kind of like uncovering an onion in this space. So people were able to see that, he's a good linebacker. His production at Utah was not fake. He was able to do it at the Shrine Bowl. He's a prototypical size. I believe he measured in at about 6'5", 232 pounds here at the Combine. I have not seen any official data myself yet about how he performed. They kind of clean that up as it goes, and it comes in. For us, the official data comes in sometime tomorrow. I haven't been able to catch up with how he performed in Lucas Oil today, but I think particularly if he runs a pretty good 40 for his size, that's something that we see get pretty close to that, 3 out of 10 item alongside all of the positions. The linebacker position has one of the best maximums on the 40-yard dash in terms of its correlation to the next level. What I like to use for that is tackles per game, just because you prefer a linebacker to have more tackles than less. And moreover, you got clean tackle data going back several years deep into the data. And so I think that's kind of up for Lander to show. I think that's something that I'm going to be closely watching as soon as that official data comes through.
I'll ask you about the other two Utes there, and, they're probably not on the radar the same way the other three are, but Dallin Bentley had a really, really good senior season, and I think he caught a lot of people off guard, surprised a lot of people in, Utah football over the past little bit. A lot of very, very good tight ends. The best one probably was Brant Keithy, but he never stayed healthy, and, of course, Dalton Kincaid is playing very well for the Buffalo Bills. But are you hearing anything about Dallin Bentley and his pro football opportunities?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a position where the combine does matter. The tight end position, offensive line, linebacker, whether it's a top maximum like it is for the linebackers or a high mean across the drills, that's really a big thing, whether it's the pro day or the combine. And so I'm going to be keeping a close eye on that. Potentially he may be able to make a name for himself. But when you're talking about those guys that are deeper into day three, there can be some movement, just because what happens with the draft curve is it really goes, the top 15 is where you're going to find those all-pro guys. So people are going to hyper-focus on that. and then it begins to flatten out as we start to get really past the middle of the second round is where it really starts to flatten out. So it's truly possible, particularly at the tight end position, that a guy like that can move around. And talking to the analysts, I found it quite interesting. They said that they don't really know if people are going to start drafting tight ends until about the beginning of the third round, middle of the third round, but they wouldn't be surprised if there is a run right before the break of day 2 and day 3. So if he can kind of squeak his way in there or be part of a bigger run or able to make a name for himself on day 3, I think that's kind of where the fit for him is.
Last one. Once upon a time, before the injuries set in, there were people that thought Logan Fano would be the better pro prospect of the brothers, and of course that has not turned out. But there's a lot of potential there if the poor kid can just stay healthy. He's also at the combine. Hearing anything about Spencer's brother, Logan Fano?
Yeah, and I think that's the real key. That's the juice out here in Indianapolis is the medicals. And so obviously those aren't made extremely public. You'll have some stuff leak out, but that's definitely something that, if I were a beat reporter looking into any single player, I'd refer to that kind of statement that you just said, that, he has a high potential, he has a high value, and I'd really be one to check in on the medicals. Because when I'm talking to the agents, when I'm talking to the analysts, when I'm talking to the teams, sure, they send guys to the actual combine. They'll send them to the drills. But at the top, teams like the Rams and the Jaguars don't really send their brass out here to Indianapolis to do anything other than to collect those medicals. So I think that's going to be a really, really important part of his profile, particularly here in Indy, is that medical.
Chase Roberts played his college ball at BYU, and he wasn't necessarily wide receiver one as far as production goes last year, but still a big body kid who a lot of people believe might have a chance to play pro football. What are you hearing, Sam, about Chase Roberts?
So this is a unique part. I talked about how the tight end position, the offensive line positions are important. I'd actually venture to say that despite the wide receiver position having a lot of flash, and despite guys like Chase Roberts, who weren't necessarily the wide receiver one, but maybe able to separate themselves on a draft board with the 40, I would actually caution teams away from the combine for the wide receivers. I think being able to create separation on the field is actually the biggest thing. And, when I'm talking to agents, particularly when they have guys like speedy wide receivers that they think can make a name for themselves, they always want to come up to me and say, hey, what do you think his estimated 40? What does the tracking data say? And I say, well, the real thing is it doesn't matter what he runs out here in Indianapolis. It really doesn't matter what he does on any of the tests, because the teams are all going to have their estimations of his actual play speed. That's actually what matters here. So each team's going to have their own proprietary thing. We think Chase Roberts is, not a true standout in terms of his play speed, but he's kind of solidly in that reasonable distribution. Obviously, any given team model may be one way or the other, but I think actually people are just not going to take a ton of stock in the combine. So I don't really know if he can raise his profile out here.
Huh. Okay. The other BYU player is Jack Kelly, pretty rangy linebacker, local kid who's from American Fork. Hearing anything about Jack?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about those linebackers, the key is really, can they play special teams? And I think that's a big question in particular with a lot of those kind of down-the-market linebackers. And I think that's something that you may be looking at some of the combine drills to give us a sense of. I was talking with some analysts, and they were talking about how great special teams coaches like to build teams. And whilst, it takes a lot to be a true Mike at the NFL and have the green dot and make sure that people are in those same positions, sometimes it's just great to have athletes down on the depth chart. So I do think with regards to some of those positions that can play on kickoff and can play on punt and punt return, that could definitely be a place where he can carve out a niche.
All right, away from the local scene, Sam, and I'm going to let you take it whatever direction you want. I know it's only Thursday, and there's plenty of on-field stuff left to kind of manifest, but give me some names you're hearing buzz about, guys that have really helped themselves out during the combine so far.
Yeah, I think you look at how the combine is set up today, and it aligns with the consensus that I was a little surprised about when it comes to Sonny Styles, the linebacker out of Ohio State. clocks in here at like 6'5", 245. That's some old school height weight mixes. He's built like an old school 90s linebacker, but he plays like a prototypical linebacker. I wouldn't be shocked if some people think he's the best player in this draft at his position. And here's the unique part about this draft that I frankly can't think of another draft in recent memory that is like this. It's truly possible that when it's all said and done, the dust is settled, everybody leaves Indianapolis, that people truly believe that the top 3 players at their position in this draft, I'm not necessarily saying positional value, but I'm just saying the best players most likely to make an all-pro team at their position are all going to be non-premium. That's Caleb Downs, the safety, Jeremiah Love, the running back, Sonny Styles, the linebacker. So it's really going to be interesting to see how some of these teams who are less analytically inclined, because I'm a data scientist, I wouldn't really recommend that you take a running back in round 1. I wouldn't really recommend that you take a linebacker before pick 20. And I really wouldn't recommend that you start considering a safety until about pick 15. It's really going to be interesting to see how these teams drafting at the top really value positional value versus just getting a blue chip player. I told you what I'd do with the data. I'm sure people would disagree with me with an old school scouting evaluation, but in this draft, at least, those seem to be the 3 most pro-ready players right now.
A lot of conversation, and I chuckle at this a little bit, Sam. So, from the NBA side of things, I did some scouting back in the day, and I can remember during the Greg Oden, Kevin Durant draft cycle, scouts saying, "Hey, we're concerned Kevin Durant can only bench 140 pounds twice." And I was like, I don't care. Well, it's Kevin Durant. You draft him and stop. I don't give a rip if he can bench 100 pounds once. Just take him. So the Ruben Bain arm length situation, all right? Like, we all watched him, and I feel like he's an absolute animal, but is this a legitimate thing teams are going to look at that might allow him to slide?
So I think there's 2 types of stats out there from time to time. There's broadcast stats and there's predictive stats. There's a great broadcast stat that's floating out around there that say that a defensive end or an edge rusher like Ruben Bain with his type of arms, his length of arms, has not had a top 10 season or a 10-sack season in something like 20 years. I think that's a broadcast stat because that's not accounting for the wingspan. That's not accounting for his production at the next level, for the ways that the consensus sees him. And when you add in all those other data points, it seems predictively that he's going to project as a pretty good player at the next level. Also, you look at something like his wingspan, which I believe he measured in at a little bit better than what his arm length was, and you can kind of start building the story of a player who, yes, maybe it's a little bit of a concern. Maybe you have those broadcast stats that you can kind of pick and choose the filters on and find a cool statistic, but predictively it just does not mean that much. And a prospect is a big, huge sphere, and it's just one little dot on the sphere that his arms are shorter.
We know that the number 1 pick is going to be Fernando Mendoza, and you and I discussed his unbelievable rise multiple different times throughout the course of your hits during college football season. So for our Raider fans, and by geographically, the Raiders are the closest NFL team to Salt Lake now. Best case scenario when Fernando Mendoza, when it's fully baked and he's able to stay healthy, what does he look like in the NFL?
Look, I may have hyperfixated a little on Clint Kubiak's willingness to run, and moreover, willingness to run in expected passing situations. It was a reason why I thought potentially they were at risk during the Super Bowl. And frankly, sans a couple explosive Kenneth Walker runs, the running game really didn't look good, and I think they ran a little bit too much. And I think that's why you started to get into the third, fourth quarter in a game that the Seahawks were dominating on defense. All of a sudden, Drake May gets a big pass, and it seems like the Patriots are right back in it before he kind of freaked out a little bit and threw another pick down the stretch. So I was worried all year about Clint Kubiak running the ball too much, not trusting his quarterback. I actually think that's probably a pro for a rookie quarterback. I'm actually going to change my tune with a new context, because here's what Fernando Mendoza is going to be walking into. He's not going to be asked too much to set protections. He's going to be asked to be in the choreography of the Shanahan-Kubiak zone run offense. He's going to be able to make easy reads, and I think he is a leader. And at least in the data, he can scramble at opportune times. He's by no means a great athlete, but he can scramble at opportune times and deliver throws. I think in his prospect profile, what he's really going to have to show is his ability to make tough throws. But I do think that the more conservative, play action based, hefty run Clint Kubiak offense is a perfect scenario for a player like Fernando Mendoza. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up early looking like a runaway rookie of the year, despite not necessarily having that crazy of a ranking in terms of expected points added per play. I wouldn't expect him to be solidly above average. I do just think it's a good landing spot for a player exactly like Mendoza.
After Mendoza's off the board, the most pathetic, hapless, embarrassing organization in the history of the world has the number 2 pick, and that would be my New York freaking football Jets. The last time a safety went 2 was 91. A lot of people have drawn the conclusion that Caleb Downs is the player and don't overthink it. Do you agree with that? And if not, what direction do you think they go?
Look, I'm an analyst. I'm an analytics guy. And maybe I'm a little biased because they have Sean Clement, their VP, who used to be a VP at Sumer Sports and was the guy that hired me. But it seems as if Darren Muji is running a tight ship in that front office with their moves. They have collected a ton of draft capital at the trade deadline on a team that was struggling mightily, even with the presence of Sauce Gardner and Q Williams. They get them out. They get a ton of draft capital back. They're going to be drafting twice in the first round. They're sitting here with the second pick. And by all means, it seems like they're going to go edge rusher. They ship Jermaine Johnson out, who was an expensive edge rusher. They get into Tavondre Sweat, who still has some high potential, despite being maybe only a first down, second down player at his size and at his weight. They bring him in on a rookie deal, save a little bit of money long term. They're now going to have the draft capital to go bring in a young edge rusher, get a little bit more surplus value. There's a lot of analytical words that I'm using here, and I think they're going to continue with the analytics. I do not suspect that they will go with Caleb Downs, a safety. If I were a betting man, it'd be some mix of Arvell Reese, the kind of projection piece. We haven't really seen him edge rush at a high level, just sheer volume. He was kind of an off-ball hybrid guy. We could see him go with David Bailey, more of a defensive pass rusher, and kind of a type that we've seen succeed in the Aaron Glenn, Dennis Allen defense. And then also we could see him go with Reuben Bain as well. So I think there's options for them at the edge rushing position. They'll get their pick of the litter. They'll get their pick of the most premium position and the top of the position at pick number 2. And so I do think they will go ahead and make at least what seems to be a correct decision given the dearth of quarterback options this year.
Who does the best job with the mock draft stuff? Porter just mocks me because I'm old and I still look at Mel Kiper and he won't tell me who he uses because he's being a little brat. So who should I look at? Who's the best mock draft guy?
So I wouldn't necessarily look at your boy Sam Brookhouse as the best mock draft guy, especially around the combine.
Right. Okay.
Because what I try to do is make database standpoints that show people how the data affects the draft. Now, I'll start using the poly market odds and I'll start bringing in data and simulations. So, and you look at some guys like Charlie Campbell from Walter Football is one that comes to mind who has been ranked as the most accurate guy. Peter Schrager also, he's designing his mock draft to be as predictive as possible at ESPN. But I think the consensus does a pretty good job. And I have a friend in the analyst community named Ben Robinson who owns a website called Grinding the Mocks. And I think he really does a really good job of collecting all of this data, bringing it into one spot, trying to make it as predictive as possible. So check out grindingthemocks.com. I think that's what you should be using for your mock draft.
Are you allowed to text me prior to something happening about something I can do on a prediction market so I can make millions of dollars?
Hey, look, it's funny you say that. I'm going to tell you an interesting story. So I would not feel comfortable doing that because I like my job, Spence. And
I'm teasing
coming
you.
On here.
For sure.
I want to keep coming on here on Thursdays. But a funny story was 2 years ago, we were hooked up with the API that the NFL has. And what people don't know is that 5-minute clock, when it runs, it's running in live time. It's not necessarily on TV time, right? It's particularly in the first round. It's more akin to what happens on day 3 where it seems like the names are just coming in. So we're sitting there in Detroit. It's me and a couple other analysts that are on location with now of the Carolina Panthers, Eric Eager, and now of the New Orleans Saints, Thomas Dimitroff, back in Atlanta on set talking, and they're throwing to us. and we get across our API, which I actually don't know if we have anymore. I think we do. But we get on our API that Michael Penix has been taken by the Atlanta Falcons. And one of my analyst friends immediately stands up and goes, "Oh, my God," to the point where it had to be addressed on the studio show. Eric Eager also says, "Oh, my God," looks at Thomas and says, "Something happened here, and we're going to have to wait for it to come on TV." You got about 400 media beat reporters and analysts that immediately whip around and look at us. We're saying, "Oh, we're sorry." Then it hits the television. Roger Goodell comes out, says Michael Penix, and everybody looks at us like, "How did y'all know that?" Huh. We just kind of had to shrug and be like, easy guess, I guess.
Wow. No, that's wild. And it's crazy how this current ecosystem with the ability of so many people to put money on these things, with these prediction markets is affecting the way that you got to do business. But I'll kick the tires with one more thing, Sam, and I'll let you get back to it. I wonder, a lot of noise, of course, around the Steelers and whether or not they're going to bring Aaron Rodgers back, whether or not he wants to come back, whether or not they should do that. Ty Simpson, 21, Pittsburgh. I'm hearing there's maybe something there. How do you think the Steelers handle their offseason quarterback decision-making process?
Look, that has been one of the biggest shocks to me, trying to aggregate consensus opinion and compare it to the data that we have. And some of the data that we have on the quarterbacks is out there right now on the evaluation on Sumer Sports' YouTube. You can go hear Mark Ellens and Mike Mayock talk about this quarterback draft. And I'm really shocked, number one, that people think Ty Simpson's the runaway quarterback, too, in this draft. I'm unconvinced that he's necessarily a tier better than Carson Beck, than Cole Payton, and Taylon Green. I think there's a much bigger cluster there. And frankly, I don't think any of those guys should go in the first round. I don't think any of them is ready to start year one. I'm happy to be wrong there, but at least looking at the prospect profiles, looking at the data, I'm shocked that it seems like Ty Simpson is the runaway quarterback, too, amongst evaluators. I would be pretty shocked if he went. I wouldn't be shocked if he solidly went in the first round. The reason why is the quarterback position is by far the most valuable position, and you kind of take the quarterback. But I just think it's really interesting the way that people think he's the runaway quarterback, too. So I guess if there was one I had to say that was going to sneak in the first round, it would be him just based off of what I'm hearing. But I don't think the data bears that out, that that's a particularly correct decision.
All right, Sam, for all of us old people that still believe Mel Kiper is good at this, where can they go find your work and get your mock draft?
Yeah, so my mock draft is probably going to be coming out here in the next 2 weeks, collecting data-based opinions. That'll be on sumersports.com. Right now, what you can go check out is I have an article about, I said that 3 out of 10 number. I broke that down position by position and produced some easy-to-read graphs to tell you where you should put your eyes for the combine. That's live on sumersports.com. And like I said, the evaluation on Sumer Sports YouTube channel, go check that out. That's a next-level show that I was blessed to be on. We got Mike Mayock back in the fold. We got WWE's Big E, who is a super football guy, played under Kirk Ferentz, knows the game well, and is an excellent broadcaster. And you got your boy Sam Brookhouse off on the corner, bringing the analytics as well. The evaluation on Sumer Sports YouTube channel. Check that out. Wide receiver episode just came out at 5 p.m. Eastern, so go check that one out as well.
Sam, good stuff, man. We'll let you get back. Excuse me. We'll let you get back to it. Travel safe. Be well. We'll chat soon, okay?
Thank y'all so much.
All right, Sam Brookhouse, who is nice and actually gives me other options instead of making fun of the fact that I look at Mel Kiper's mock draft.
Well, I would just point you to Sam and the guys over there. But you can look at Mel Kiper if you want. If you want to believe that Jimmy Clausen and let's go some other ones. Johnny Manziel, Jimmy Clausen, Sanders. What's his name? Shedeur Sanders, Jamarcus Russell. These guys were all Hall of Famers before they entered the league in Mel Kiper's eyes. I will say, usually does okay on the mocks, but his quarterback evaluation is like year after year astonishing to me.
Yeah, to me, it's very simple. I think you've learned at this point that I'm a very, very much a creature of habit.
Yeah.
So you can look at my computer throughout the course of the show, and my main stop is ESPN.com because it's been my main stop doing this job for 20 years. And if there's an NBA story, I go to the NBA page. If there's an NFL story, I go to the NFL page. Because once upon a time, let me just give you a history lesson, young fella. There weren't a ton of options. ESPN, both on TV and on the interwebs, was like the main deal. It's only out of habit. That's all that it is. I'm not saying he's awesome. It's just he's there at ESPN.com.
To be clear, I use ESPN still every day. the website. It's it's easy to use. It's front facing. It's there.
Yeah.
That being said, when I watch and look at Mel Kiper's evaluations, it is usually just the quarterback stuff that I give a huge side eye to.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, I just recently started watching things on YouTube, okay? Like, I'm an old person in, like, just my routine and habits. YouTube's amazing, but that's an opinion in 2026 that people had 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So.
There was a time in it was 2010, 2011. Mel Kiper literally said on air, "I will retire if Jimmy Clausen is not a elite quarterback in 8 years."
Oh.
He didn't do it,
Huh.
and then he kind of doubled down on the same thing last year with Shador. Shador had the worst quarterback rating in Cleveland Browns starting quarterback history.
There you go. Well, lesson learned. Do not listen to Mel Kiper about quarterbacks. All right, we'll catch a break coming up on the other side. It is a Thursday, so we'll welcome in our friends from Handy and Handy. We're back to some both the NBA, college basketball, NFL combine stuff in the 5 o'clock hour. Before we say goodnight at 6, busy Thursday show. Keep it here on ESPN 700. All right, it's Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday, right about now, with our good friends Garrett and Preston Handy from the law firm of Handy and Handy. Gentlemen, happy Thursday. How we doing?
Hey, Spence. How you doing? Happy Thursday.
Hi, Spence.
All good here. Let's start with a really interesting story. You know, I didn't even know what a prediction market was until a 60-minute piece maybe a month and a half ago, and now it seems like they're everywhere. And our governor here in Utah, Spencer Cox, recently told a reporter that prediction market apps like Kalshi are illegal in Utah. Now, we're going to see this battle play out, but I'll give you the space. What's the latest between this back and forth?
Well, thanks, Spence, because I didn't know what a prediction market was till earlier today, and I'm not still that I know what it is. But this grows out of House Bill 243 in Utah that aims to regulate prop betting, proposition betting. We've talked about it in other stories. That's where, like a pitcher, people are going to bet on what he's going to throw, and he's going to throw a ball. He throws a ball, and that, those are where it's illegal. But people can bet on prop betting, how many assists a player has, how many points they have in a quarter, anything you can find. So now a group called Kalshi EX, they've gotten ahead of the game here and sued Spencer Cox and other state officials for a law that they think is going to pass here. They want to block the law. And what they say is basically that Kalshi operates a federally, I'm reading this, regulated exchange where users trade contracts tied to real-world outcomes, commonly known as prediction markets. Now, this isn't limited to sports stuff. This is like commodity trading. And Kalshi argues Congress gave the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, not the individual states, exclusive jurisdiction over trading of regulated exchanges. Kalshi says Utah is trying to enforce gambling laws would undermine the federal government framework. Well, Spencer Cox, there's been some back and forth, and he hits back and basically says, no, he says, are you saying that you have authority over derivative markets of LeBron James rebounds? So I think what this comes down to is, apparently other states have challenged this, and there's lawsuits going on in other states, and Kalshi claims that they are winning these in other states. But I think what it comes down to, maybe Garrett can shed some light on this, is whether trading on futures, this is what Kalshi says, we're trading on futures, the commodity market, and it's not gambling. But the issue here is the state of Utah saying, no, this is gambling. People are essentially gambling on this, and so we have to treat it differently. So we'll see what happens here. I think it's very interesting, and I don't understand it. I want to try and understand it better.
All right, Garrett, over to you, buddy.
Yeah, I agree with Preston, but yeah, part of this really also just will come down to whether federal law applies. Does federal law govern this, or does state law, right? Can each state go ahead and regulate gambling like this? So far from Spencer Cox and from our Attorney General, it's just been some quotes out there and some saber rattling, and the state of Utah has not taken any action. So this is a preemptive strike by Kalshi to say, hey, we want to just get a decision from the court that Utah doesn't have any jurisdiction essentially over us, right? So I think, maybe next year we'll be talking about this, that it's a Supreme Court case, because there is a split among the states.
My advice to my listeners continues to remain consistent. Do not bet on sports. You work too hard for your money. Keep it in your bank account. Keep it in your pocket. But I guess free will. All right, over to the world of college football. Cincinnati is suing Brendan Sorsby over $1 million exit fee after he took off to be the quarterback at Texas Tech. What's the latest here?
Yeah, this is, we've talked about several of these types of cases already. This is kind of because it's been such a moving target, these NIL contracts that players have with schools. But Brendan Sorsby goes from Cincinnati to Texas Tech, and he's got in his contract $1 million buyout clause. He was contracted to play next fall. So he's pulled out of that contract and headed to Texas Tech. Of course, we can all read between the lines, and they knew this was part of his contract, and I think Texas Tech was betting on it, and that was part of their, negotiation. One of the things that's interesting about this is the College Sports Commission guidelines, and these guidelines. I just really don't know how enforceable they are, but it says that in this case, Texas Tech would have to pay that $1 million out of their $20.5 million revenue sharing cap. So I think that's part of the issue here is Brendan Sorsby's lawyers are saying, hey, we're not going to pay this. Texas Tech's going to pay this. And Cincinnati's essentially in a situation where they're going, well, our contract's with Brendan Sorsby. And we thought, we had a deal and we're going to go after you. And so it's going to be interesting. I mean, is this a PR nightmare for schools, to be suing their former players? I'm not so sure, but, that's also being said.
All right, Preston, what do you got here, bud?
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot on this. We heard about the UW quarterback. Can't remember his name. He was going to jump into the portal, and UW said, hey, we're going to sue you for your contract. Never heard much about it. He stayed at UW. Then the Duke quarterback, he says, I'm bouncing to Miami. And Duke, what they did, they ran to court and filed for a preliminary injunction saying, we're going to prevent you from entering the transfer portal. Well, ultimately, he got his way. But this one's a different, I think, because Sorsby's already gone, and Cincinnati knows that. He's going to Texas Tech. But I think this is the first time we ever heard about a buyout or an exit fee. And I think it's really interesting because I think no doubt there's been talks leading up to this between Sorsby and maybe Texas Tech and Cincinnati about this. And obviously Sorsby doesn't agree with their position on it. That's why things end up in court, or maybe he's just using it as a negotiation piece. But I'd like this where schools are trying to protect their assets, right? They invest in a player and, for, like Garrett said, for multiple years, and put something in there like an exit fee. Yeah, you can leave, but if you do, here's a liquidated damages clause that you have to pay this, and everybody understands it. And I think it would also be interesting if they put in there, hey, if you leave and we have to go to court over this, the prevailing party gets attorney's fees. So, there's a hammer there. And so it would be, not only are you going to pay your own attorney's fees, and again, we don't know if Texas Tech is footing the bill here and defending him, and if ultimately they're going to pay the exit fee. But it's like, well, not only will you pay your attorney's fees, but you'll pay ours too. So, there's something to kind of to lose there, not just have it free for all. And these are contracts. I like this one better than the other ones. I think that they have ground to stand on. They're saying, no, yeah, you can leave, okay, but as part of our contract, we get paid.
So let's move over to a story. And if I remember correctly, Bill Russell's children are not a big fan of Bill Russell's widow. It's now their mother, and I think they got sideways a number of years ago. But Bill Russell's widow is now suing his daughter over what is being characterized as breach of contract. What's going on here?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, the late, great Bill Russell died in 2022 at the age of 88. And go back, as you mentioned, in 2015, there was a conflict between his children and Janine. And the issue was they were claiming that she was taking advantage of a vulnerable adult. So the issue there was he mentally stable to be making decisions? They were saying she was taking advantage of him. Well, ultimately, that was at court, and it resulted in a settlement. And part of the settlement was, I think, Karen, the daughter, walked away with $500,000. But also part of it was, hey, we have a non-disclosure agreement and a non-disparagement agreement. And so now Janine, the widow, who you mentioned is not the children's mother, is suing Karen, only Karen, the daughter, because she says she came out with some statements that violated the non-disparagement agreement. Specifically, she came out and told the Boston Globe, my dad had well-known cognitive issues. Kind of she's jumping back and kind of throwing shade on what happened before, kind of saying, this all happened before. And, and part of the issue was that was proved in that agreement was, I think a medical expert came in and said, no, he's of sound mind and that type of thing. So she has sued him, and she came out and said that, Bill was cleared of medical professional to make his own decisions, and now I think I have a duty to go over this. Karen got $500,000 in consideration of this, and I can no longer stay silent while my husband's incredible and unique legacy is tarnished. So I don't know what she's seeking. I don't know if there's some type of punitive damage or type of sanction if you violate that contract, but she's claiming breach of contract. We had specific terms, and what this will do, this will put these specific terms into court. Now, whether it'll be frozen and not issued to the public what those terms were, but that will be the issue there. What were the terms of the contract, and by doing this, has she violated them?
Over to you, Garrett. What do you got, bud?
I don't really have anything else. I think Preston covered it pretty well.
All right, we'll move over to the next story. Our final two stories are of local interest, updating some stories that we have covered. So the UVU versus the WAC. The judge has granted a TRO and a preliminary injunction and has ordered the WAC to reinstate broadcast rights and allow postseason play. Just give us an update on this one before we move on.
Yeah, great news for the athletes at UVU. They're going to be able to play in postseason tournaments and have their games broadcast. That was the penalty that the WAC was trying to hang over UVU's head for allegedly breaching their contract and leaving the conference. Again, here we're talking about another $1 million buyout would be the fee that UVU would pay, and UVU had said, hey, we're not going to pay it. And the WAC said, okay, well, we're going to try to enforce this. So there's kind of some dueling lawsuits, but UVU kind of had to rush to court here in Utah court and file this for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. And essentially the argument is that, well, hey, we've got this pending litigation. We've got a legitimate dispute over this contract and whether or not this $1 million buyout is owed. But in the meantime, our kids are going to suffer, our athletes, irreparable harm if they're not able to play in these postseason tournaments. And so these things move real quick. It's already been in front of the judge. The judge has agreed with UVU, issued a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. And so what that does, it just is going to kind of preserve the status quo during the pendency of the litigation. A couple more things the court found that I think are important. They did say that they thought UVU is actually likely to prevail on their contract claim with the WAC over the $1 million. And, of course, they found that there would be irreparable harm. And then finally, that the damage to UVU really outweighs the damage to the WAC. Hey, if to hold these kids out and what's happening here is a bigger deal to UVU than it is to the WAC, that can wait to potentially get their $1 million. All
right, Preston, what do you got, bud?
Only one thing. This all started when the WAC sued UVU in Texas federal court trying to get this exit fee, and I don't know what's going on there. I know that UVU kind of claimed that the WAC didn't have jurisdiction over it. I haven't heard that it's been dismissed, so question the WAC's going to think, oh, we're here and you're in Utah and we don't think you have jurisdiction over us. It'll be interesting to see if they follow the court's order on this. I think they will, but, they might fight it.
All right, final one for today. And, of course, it is of local interest, so we'll spend the rest of our time together on the latest with the Parker Kingston situation. BYU police involved in the investigation. BYU officials learned only after the arrest, and that was one of the things most people have been talking about. What's the latest here as far as his next appearance, what the preliminary hearing looks like, and just fill us in. I'll just kind of give you the time. Latest on the Parker Kingston story.
Yeah, 3 updates. First one is easy. Parker Kingston was dismissed, expelled, let go from BYU, and not on the team anymore. I'll hit on the first one, and Garrett will hit on the second one. As you mentioned, a big question that everyone had when this came out was, okay, this happened in February of 2025, and the arrest happens in February 2026. What was going on during that period? And when did BYU first learn of it? Those were the two things. And we've answered it that the St. George police were doing their investigation during that time, and I don't think they felt like they had probable cause to the point where they could, do an arrest and send the information to the prosecuting attorney. But we've learned today that during this investigation, the BYU Police Department became aware in November of 2025, and they assisted in the investigation. One of the things they did is the St. George police came to them and said, we want you to issue a warrant for Parker Kingston's telephone, and they did that. So they assisted in it, and you say, well, why didn't they say anything? Well, they complied with certain laws, Title IX, certain criminal laws that basically said, this was an investigation going on in another city. The crime didn't happen on BYU's campus. So with all of these things, we kind of complied with protocol and the law and didn't report it and didn't need to report it to anyone. So that's when they found out, and it came out that BYU officials, the football team, Kalani, they learned of it really at the time of their arrest. That's what's been reported.
All right, Garrett, over to you, bud.
Well, the final thing on this is the preliminary hearing has been moved up to March 23rd. It was originally scheduled for April 13th. And what happens at a preliminary hearing is that's when the prosecutors have a chance to present their evidence and show that there was probable cause that the defendant committed the crime that he's been charged of. And part of that, which is kind of interesting, the victim could potentially testify. I don't really see that happening. I mean, it's possible, but basically we're going to know a lot more, some more details potentially after March 23rd.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate the time. A tough story, of course. No fun to cover something that really is sad in a lot of different ways. But before I set you loose, for any of our listeners who have any legal questions, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy at Handy?
Yes, Spence, we love coming on here with you to just talk about these legal issues in the world of sports. Everyone knows we've been on it for a long time. We're a personal injury law firm. We help people that have been involved in accidents, take them through the legal process, and make sure you get taken care of. Call us at 801-264-6677 or visit our website at handylawutah.com. You can learn all about us there and submit your questions.
Okay, gentlemen, have a great weekend. Thanks for the time. As always, go Utes.
Go Utes.
Go Utes. Thanks.
All right, final hour of the show comes your way. Coming up on the other side, we'll get you an update on the NFL Combine as the on-field workouts are going on right now. 5 Utes in attendance, of course, Spencer Fano, as well as Caleb Lomu, Logan Fano, Dallin Bentley, and Lander Barton, and then Chase Roberts and Jack Kelly there from BYU. So we'll get to that coming up in a bit. League One Volleyball is Utah's professional volleyball team. The next home game at the BYU Fieldhouse is on March the 5th. Get your tickets today at lovbsl.com. That's lovbsl.com. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. Keep it here on a Thursday on ESPN 700. All right, Drive at 5 time, Thursday afternoon style, about 5 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. It has been a very spring-like Thursday, as most of February has been. It was about 64 degrees and sunny a little bit earlier here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. Looks like we're going to have some more mild weather over the weekend as we will turn our calendars to March coming up on Sunday. So, yeah, about 56 degrees and sunny currently. And a very warm weekend. Maybe get outside, do a little golfing, a little hiking, what have you. Happy Thursday to you. Want to let you know that you can win $1 million courtesy of us at ESPN 700. One bracket, $1 million. It's the ESPN 700 92.1 FM $1 Million Bracket Challenge going live on Selection Sunday, which is March the 15th. You can sign up today on ESPN700sports.com. It's brought to you by Big Willie's, Game Day Men's Health, Intermountain Bobcat, Budweiser, the Intermountain Sportsman's Expo, Burger Fusion, and the Utah RV Super Show. NFL Combine rolling along today. On-field workouts started today. The University of Utah has 5 football players in Indianapolis with, of course, Caleb Lomu, Spencer Fano, Logan Fano, in addition to Dallin Bentley and Lander Barton. BYU with 2 players in attendance, Jack Kelly and Chase Roberts. So we're going to go live to the Combine in Indianapolis coming up. We'll call that in about 15, 20 minutes from right now to bring you the latest. It is a game day for the Utah Jazz. The Jazz are taking on the Pelicans, 7 o'clock here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. The Jazz are clearly trying to not win basketball games. The Pelicans aren't as obviously not trying to win. They're just not good. I don't think they've been intentionally tanking. They've had a ton of injuries. And they've actually won 2 straight, and they're 4-2 in their last 6 games. So the Jazz, of course, will continue to be unserious. But the Jazz did make a move today. Mo Bamba, baby. Mo Bamba. 10-day contract with the Utah Jazz. Bamba has been with the Jazz G League affiliate, 17 points, 12 boards, about 3 blocks. Once upon a time, people thought he was going to be an awesome NBA player. But Kevin Reynolds, our friend from the Salt Lake Tribune, reported yesterday that Lauri Markkanen injured during practice and will have an MRI on his hip and his ankle. There have been no updates in that direction as of today outside of an unserious reporter lying, as he is often wont to do, about a doctor being sent to follow up an MRI that Lauri was going to have from the league. That is not how that works. It's not even legal to do that. Of course, as it pertains to the CBA, what is in place is the league has access to MRI results because that's what's stipulated by the CBA and its player participation policy. But, of course, and this really shouldn't have even had to be reported, but actual NBA reporters like Chris Mannix and Mark Stein have refuted the report that the NBA was sending a doctor, an independent doctor, to Salt Lake. I spoke with people from the Jazz specifically. I spoke with people from the league specifically and was even embarrassed to ask the question because of how erroneous it is and how silly that anybody would indicate that that could even be a potential thing. A lot of people around here were freaking out about it. I'm sorry to tell you that you were lied to because it really does play into this narrative that the league hates you because the Jazz play in Utah, which, of course, is beyond silly. Now, there's a continuation of a theme and an unserious person posting for engagement as a result of the Jazz being fined $500,000 a few weeks ago for tanking, which they deserve because that's what they're doing. Now, of course, they're not alone, and it has been a little bit disappointing to see the NBA stay silent on a team like Washington that made deals for Trae Young and Anthony Davis, and we are not going to see either of those two play basketball all year long, which flies directly in the face of the NBA player participation policy, and they do deserve to get fined and punished. Adam Silver, according to Shams Charania, who does break news, told the 30 general managers around the course of the NBA last week that he will be placing some anti-tanking policies in place, enacting some anti-tanking policies in place for next year. We don't know what those are. My guess is it's going to be a meeting with the competition committee and the board of governors, and they'll probably come together with the ideas that are the best practices, the most pragmatic, and put into place there. So there you go. That's the latest. There was a erroneous report that was simply a lie. Just like Oklahoma City was not complaining to the NBA about the Jazz and what they're doing, the NBA is not sending an independent doctor to Utah to look over the shoulders of the doctors who are following up Lauri Markkanen's MRI. So let's put that aside, even though it's just silly and I'm embarrassed that we're even discussing it. The more important thing is what's going on. Because it goes on the spectrum of one side is simply no matter what, Lauri's going to sit all year, and that's my guess. Regardless of what the MRI says, I do think this is a scenario that will allow the Utah Jazz to rest Lauri Markkanen instead of playing him for 3.5 quarters, then sitting him when the Jazz have the lead in the fourth, because that behavior led to a $500,000 fine for the Jazz. And since the team has been fined, Jaren Jackson Jr. with knee surgery has been shut down. Yusuf Nurkic with some sort of nose procedure has been shut down. And I haven't heard anything official about Keontae George being shut down, but they're saying he's dealing with both a right and a left ankle issue. And I don't think we're going to see him play either. So until we see word on Markkanen, it's hard to know exactly what to do with the story, but my guess is going to be that he will be shut down. But my concern is this something that's actually real? Is this not a cleanup procedure? Like Jaren Jackson Jr.'s knee surgery, if the Jazz were a championship contender, would have been put off until after the season. Same thing with the Nurkic nose surgery, but it's convenient to get it done now. So you can just sit and the Jazz can lose the games they need to lose the rest of the way. So my guess is we're not going to see Lauri no matter what. Markkanen will not play. But I do have this fear until we hear the results of what the MRI actually says. What will it look like? What do we know? Is this something that is potentially long-term? Because that's the fear here. If it is, it does change a lot of different things. I mean, lest we forget, Lauri Markkanen is still by far the best player on this roster. So no new news as of that. Ultimately, it was Kevin Reynolds who reported it from the Salt Lake Tribune. And so I've been kind of tracking his feed a little bit. He's the new Jazz beat writer since Andy Larson has moved on. And we don't know anything as of now as far as the update goes. The Big 12 basketball schedule is dormant until Saturday. There's no Big 12 basketball games tonight, so both Utah and BYU looking to finish the regular season with a flurry. We'll have to wait until Saturday. There's only one game featuring two top 25 teams tonight. Michigan State is in West Lafayette, Indiana at McKay Arena to take on Purdue. So kind of a quiet night of college basketball as far as like the big dogs go. I mean, it is in the end of February, so there's like 40 games going on right now, but only one featuring top 25 teams. Utah State got smoked last night by San Diego State. High speed ahead to the Mountain West Conference tournament. Ken Pomeroy stopped by earlier. If you missed that conversation and you're looking to get a little guidance prior to potentially filling out your bracket, as we will turn our calendars to March on Sunday, I would go to kenpom.com and check out a subscription. I use his stuff every single year, and I've been a subscriber since like 2014. He still has Utah State kind of by far, quite frankly, as the best team in the Mountain West Conference. So as they approach the Mountain West Conference tournament, of course, San Diego State showed that they can play with them. New Mexico is very good as well. And then we'll see how BYU finishes off the season. Utah will travel to Arizona State on Saturday for a 1:30 Mountain Time tip. BYU is in Morgantown to take on West Virginia at 3:30. And the Utah women, looks like the Utah women are going to be the 9 seed in the Big 12 tournament. We talked to Gavin Peterson yesterday. The 9 seed plays the worst team in the conference as far as the bracket goes. But if you're a top 8 seed, you do get a first-round bye. I believe Arizona State would have to lose a couple of games for that to change. Utah Mammoth lost last night, their first game back after the Olympic break. They're going to be off tonight. They'll be back in action tomorrow, hosting Minnesota out. All right, wrapping it up. Final segment of the program for this Thursday afternoon. Coming up tomorrow, I'm out. I'm done. I've had it. Can take this job and shove it. Well, at least for tomorrow. I'll be back Monday. But Porter has you taken care of. Our guy Tony Parks along for the ride. I know you're a football guy. Love the combine. How much of the experience, because the more interesting part of it, the NFL does a really good job. So we got the NFL Network on in the studio. Like, some of the highlights, they just showed Jack Kelly, BYU's Jack Kelly, running, I think, a 40. Depending on who they're interviewing, right now it's Kellen Moore. The side conversations to me are a little bit more fascinating because you just learn a little bit more. How much of this do you consume?
Yeah, not very much, honestly, on the TV side. And I dial in and look at the numbers and do a good skim of it. But for the most part, the stuff at the combine that matters happens behind closed doors, or it happens on kind of a boring setting, right? It's the 40 is the big thing for TV. But if you ask anyone there who's there to scout, the 40 is really just that, right? We know how fast these guys are. We know how fast they are in pads. If you're an offensive lineman, they may be really dialed into your first 10 split, right? Which is literally out of your gate. There's lasers at 10 yards, 20 yards, and 40 yards. They're just looking at the 10-yard one. They don't care how fast your O-lineman is 40, 50 yards down the field. And then the really interesting stuff usually happens in interview rooms with some of these prospects, in medical rooms with some of these prospects. So I tune in, I look at the numbers, but a lot of times it's kind of just on in the background and making sure I'm catching up on the guys that are potential movers. That's the other thing. The majority of the guys that are here, they're not moving up and down at all on the draft board. There's 4 or 5 guys that teams are having big question marks about, big maybe red flags that they want answered. The rest of the combine is fodder and filler for off-season television.
NFL Network caught Aaron Glenn napping. Aaron Glenn is the head coach of the Jets.
Right.
And he was napping during the combine earlier today. I mean, look, snapshot videos, you're always going to get caught in a moment, but it's just perfect that it's the head coach of the Jets. Lander Barton's NFL potential, in your opinion, sounds like what?
He's actually one of those guys that I just mentioned could be a mover because his NFL potential is still there's a big window there. There's a big, I don't want to say boom or bust because I think he's going to be like a good special teams guy if needed. But like his brother, Lander has some holes in his game that he really needs to fill. Some of it is tackling. Some of it is actually pursuit, less than tackling, right? Getting to your spot and then breaking down and getting into tackle position. We saw, go watch the tape. We saw a few times where in open field, Lander had a lot to gain at Utah, right? Now, is he really good in play recognition? He's really good around the ball, kind of chaos plays. He's a difference maker there. But there's some stuff in coverage, some stuff in the open field that I think scouts are really going to tune into. He's measured really well. I mean, he's big. He's 6'5", 235 plus pounds, and he can move well. So he's going to jump off the page for scouts, and then they're going to get him into an interview room, and they're going to go through legit film work with him and see how he's reacting, how he can explain what he's seeing in front of him, and that's where I think he's going to be able to impress scouts. His NFL potential is there, but it is sliding scale because he's not a sure thing. Like his brother, there is stuff that he can improve upon, and Cody did, and that's why he's been in the league for so long. But Lander's going to have to answer some of those questions.
Miami Dolphins were named the best organization by the NFL Players Union survey today. Pittsburgh Steelers named the worst, which is kind of interesting. So if you're a Jet fan, you can just say, at least we're not the Steelers, I guess. Although home game field, F- for my New York Jets. It's depressing. All right, pretty good night of NBA hoops. Kind of a weird, quiet night in the world of college basketball, but the Big 12 in both Utah and BYU will be back at it tomorrow. The Jazz are unserious about competing. I think the Pelicans would like to be serious, but they suck at basketball, so that's your local game tonight here in Salt Lake. All right, Porter, like I said, tomorrow it is you and it is Tony Parks. You're going to be holding the fort down. Tony was on the call for ESPN Plus for the Utah basketball game against UCF. No, Iowa State. He called the Iowa State Utah game. So we'll have some good stuff there. What should our listeners expect on tomorrow's show? And then I'll be back on Monday.
On tomorrow's show, Lindsey Rhodes, live from Indianapolis, another one of our friends from Sumer Sports, to give us the latest there, maybe some more numbers on our local prospects. Howard Beck stops by for the NBA Daily Assist. We'll get a PGA Tour leaderboard update from our guy Paul Pugmire. I think I'm going to try to talk our guy Big T Thurl Bailey into hopping on the program, and we'll go from there. As you mentioned, it's myself, it's Tony Parks on a Friday, getting you ready for the weekend ahead.
There you go. So enjoy that. Give Porter and Tony your attention. I'll be back on Monday after just a quick jaunt to California. Special thank you today, Brian Dunseth, Ken Pomeroy, Pablo Mastroianni, and Sam Bruckhouse. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show today, you can go to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com, download our mobile app, and take us on the go. ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then for what we do in our space every afternoon, check out our podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your show. So just subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, and give us all the stars. It helps. Reporter, I'm Spence, saying goodnight. Have a great Thursday evening. We'll talk to you. Porter and Tony have you taken care of tomorrow. I'll be back on Monday. So be good to yourself, be good to each other, and keep it locked right here on your home of the